Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird brain, it's a plane, it's iWalter. Yes, it's iWalter, strange visitor from another planet who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. iWalter, who can change the course of mighty rivers, bend ears with his annoying voice, and who disguised as Walter Interranti, mild-mannered janitor for a great metropolitan newspaper, fights a never-ending battle for truth, nonsense, and the American way. And now, another exciting episode in the adventures of iWalter.
Alrighty, hey, this is iWalter, and it is Saturday, May 26th. It is Memorial Day weekend. I do have my guest that I promised everybody. It is Rich Mingin.
Promised everybody?
Promised for a good show. How's that? And it's going to be on Linux and some other stuff. It depends. It's a no-holds bar. We're going to be breaking glasses and breaking things in my room because I got plenty of figurines.
I don't want to break things in your room. There's not enough room.
Oh, that's true, actually. There is not enough room. I keep on itching down my nose. Is that a bad sign? Because they usually say when you get in a fight, your nose itches, but...
Never heard that before.
You never heard that before.
Does that mean I have to punch you now?
No, my nose is big enough. I don't need any bigger. So, yeah, so, hey, it's great. I got you here, Rich. I guess I don't need these now. Well, actually, I do. I can't see now. Well,
nobody on the podcast can tell what you're talking about. Your glasses off.
I had taken my reading glasses off. So why I wanted you on, but amongst other things, we can talk about a ton of stuff, actually, if we want to.
That is usually my thing.
Yes. I'm very disappointed, by the way, this weekend with Solo, because I looked at the rate record sales. They're not that great. And the movie was actually really good. I was surprised. You haven't seen it yet. I can't say much.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard some things about it, and I've been watching the Rotten Tomatoes ratings, and they're not so good.
Yeah, I don't know why everybody's so against this film. It is really good. It is really good. I'm not making this up. So it's good.
Well, I mean, that's what Walter feels about the movie.
Yeah.
We're talking about what everybody feels about the movie.
Well, everybody apparently doesn't like it, or is it just people sabotaging the film so it won't do that well? I don't know.
There was a kerfluffle that people were like, oh, the Rotten Tomatoes was including ratings for other movies under Solo. And it's like that. There was one. One. It gets enough bad ratings on its own. Nobody's messing with the ratings.
I don't know, because I was with a diehard fan in the theater when I saw it. Sorry, my nose keeps on it.
I'm a diehard fan.
Well, you haven't seen it yet, so I have to wait until you see it to decide what happens, I guess.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah. I'm hoping for a good review of Rich Mingin that you respond back and say it was actually not that bad. Sorry, my nose. Anyway, I am doing my show. I hope you're happy. Well, I'm happy about it. Because you're the one. I'm the Padawan still after 30 years or whatever it is. But I am actually using Linux.
20. No, not even 20.
20 years almost.
15. No, I guess it was a little more than that. Because I'm trying to remember. Because I remember 9/11. Before that, you were messing with it now and then.
Yeah.
And then you went and took a long break.
I did.
Probably should just call it 15.
15 sounds good. I mean, that's still fair.
Yeah.
But I mean, I am using Linux now, not the way you taught me to use it, though. That's the problem. But I am using it, and
It's a tool.
It is a tool. I'm a tool. No.
That's a different topic entirely.
Oh, fine.
No, it's a tool. If it works for what you're trying to do, that's great. And if it doesn't, that's fine too. I mean, there's no purity of, I only have Linux in my house. I have the best, most intellectually and ideologically pure operating system everywhere. I refuse to use cell phones because they all have crap on them. Well, yeah, they do, but it's a question of what's the right tool for the job.
Yeah, that's true.
If it's not the right tool, then it's not the right tool, and you find the right one. Otherwise, you spend your entire life driving screws with a hammer. You can do it, but why?
Yeah, that's true. But you did get me. I remember, I think when you first started using Linux, because you were getting tired of Windows at that point. I forget which version of Windows we were using.
Well, it was the late 90s, so it would have been 9X, and probably Windows 2000 betas.
Yeah, and you're the first one who taught me that, hey, there's another operating system. There is another one.
There is another.
There is another, and it was Linux.
There are a great many others, actually.
Yeah, that's the thing I was actually going to ask, too. You're running, like, a couple different versions, because now your new job, you're actually working on Linux OSs, or in OS for your business.
I work with Linux and AIX, which is IBM's personal Unix. It's actually really, really old and really well established, but you'll never see it because it only runs on IBM's hardware.
Okay, now there is a difference between Linux and Unix, because Linux, if you take the L and the I, it looks like a U. That was the whole purpose of that. That's
well, it's supposed to be Linus Torvalds is little Unix.
Yeah.
So Linux.
Linux, yes.
And then since we're Americans, we say it wrong, and instead of saying Linux for Linus Torvalds, we say Linux for Linus Torvalds.
Yeah.
Of course, then it should be Linux, but all right, whatever.
But there is a difference between Linux and Unix, or it's pretty much the same thing.
Unix is a family.
Yeah.
There is no, you can't download Unix because it's a category. It's like Windows. You can't download Windows. You download a specific version of Windows. There's Windows 7 and there's Windows Vista and there's Windows 10.
Yeah.
Unixes or Unices is a big category, so it includes lots of things. One of the tricky little bits is technically Linux is not a Unix, because in order to be considered an official Unix, you not only have to meet these technical arguments, which Linux meets all the technical arguments, you also have to pay a licensing fee.
For Unix?
Yep.
Okay, I didn't know that.
In order to call yourself a Unix and to be considered a Unix officially. There's a fee you pay, and there's an audit they run, and you get a little certificate in the mail, and you can refer to your operating system as a Unix operating system. What's really funny is Mac OS is technically a Unix.
Yeah,
and Linux is technically not.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well,
but it all comes down to paying the fee.
Okay, but Linux, you don't have to pay any fees if you don't want
Correct.
to. That's open source completely. I thought Unix was, too. I guess not.
Technically, Linux is only a very small part.
Yeah.
When you download Linux, with the air quotes, and you run Linux on your computer, you're actually running a whole bunch of different things.
Okay.
Linux is the kernel that does all the heavy lifting. It's the part that actually runs on the hardware on the computer.
Yeah.
But then there's layers of stuff on top of it to help you get things done.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole bunch of utilities that, you, for example, would probably never talk to. There's cat and awk, and you can put Perl and Python libraries on there and do all sorts of neat stuff.
Yeah.
But they're mostly text-based, and so you don't really see them when you look at it. When you walk by and you look at a computer and look at what's on the screen, you just see a whole bunch of text, and you go, oh, yeah, that's cool and all. But then in order to see the text, most people run a windowing system, a graphical desktop. They want that so they can see, and they can use their mouse, and they can click and drag and drop.
A GUI.
Right, and that's provided by Xwindows or Xorg, which is a particular version. There's actually multiple now. All of Linux are now transitioning to a new one called Wayland, which will do really cool things down the road, but right now it just means that if you run a graphical program and it crashes all of your other graphical programs.
Oh, I didn't know that, because I'm not using Wayland, though, I don't think.
No, you wouldn't be.
Okay.
You wouldn't be. The version of Mint you're using is still running on Xorg, which is the old standard. So Wayland brings in these great new shiny things that it's going to do for like detecting monitors on the fly and allowing more control over your resolution and your scaling and all other fun stuff.
Oh.
But it's still really new. It's still really shiny. It still has a lot of issues.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
But it's not there yet. Ubuntu's new release that they just made, they were talking about transitioning everyone to Wayland. The release they actually did late last year was default Wayland. So if you installed Ubuntu 17.10, the fall 2017 version, it actually ran Wayland by default.
Okay.
And they did that on purpose because that release, they do a new one every 6 months.
Yeah.
And that way, if it was a total train wreck, they only had to take care of it for a little over 6 months, and then they could get rid of it.
Okay.
The one they just put out this spring, 1804, is a long-term release. They have to stand behind that one for 2 years plus, and then like 5 years for the extended support. So they definitely didn't want to try anything new or exciting on that one. So they actually went back to Xorg.
Okay.
They install both, and there's an option. On 1710, if you didn't click anything, you got Wayland.
Okay.
On 1804, if you don't click anything to override, you get Xorg.
Okay.
And you can switch back and forth between them.
Okay, that's kind of cool. Now, you were mentioning, because just in case somebody didn't know, there is how many different versions of Linux out there at this point?
So anybody that wants to can sit down with, the knowledge and the resources over a weekend and create their own distribution of Linux. And they don't have to give it to anybody. So no one could tell you for sure.
Okay.
I mean, there could be some guy in a computer science lab in Georgia right now, just cranked out a distribution, and day after tomorrow, he's going to decide he's sick of it and end it, and no one will have ever downloaded it or run it.
Okay.
But the number would be up in the meantime. But if you just want the names that you hear most often, there are easily half a dozen really big distributions.
Red Hat was the biggest back in the day.
Red Hat has two.
Oh, it has two.
There's Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which they sell, and they sell support for. And then there is Fedora, which they give away for free, and anybody can download and run, but it's supported for something like 6 months each release. And then they got another release and another release and another release.
Yeah.
It's great if you're running it at home. It's not so good if you're running it at work.
Okay.
And that's why they make Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which they support for a really long time, and they charge for support on it, and it's a commercial product.
Probably
There's
not as much as
SUSE, there's Debian, there's Arch. I think Slackware is still around. One of the big categories is called Linux from scratch, which is where you start with some kind of computer that has something that you can use, and you actually build all of the software that you're going to use from the source packages. So you download the source code, the raw code that somebody wrote.
Yeah.
And you compile it yourself and install it into this new Linux that you're propping up from nothing.
I remember you doing that yourself. You were learning.
It's a bear. It's one of those projects I think everybody should do once. It's like building a car by hand or rebuilding a motorcycle. It's really great to have done it.
Yeah.
But it's not something I think you necessarily want to commit to doing on a regular basis for a long time.
Well, you're starting to learn C+, I guess, and stuff, probably from using Linux or
mostly scripting.
Scripting.
I do a lot of scripting, and scripting's fun. It's a simple thing because it's not quite programming, but it kind of is. When you run a command in Linux, you pull up a little text window, and it says, "Hi, here you are," and you can type different things.
Yeah.
So you can type a command, ls. It lists the contents of the directory you're in.
Yeah.
Very, very simple. But maybe you want to do something with that information. Maybe you have a card out of your camera, and it's got video and it's got pictures.
Yeah.
And you want to move the video to your your network storage or put it in iCloud or something, but you want to take all your pictures and you want to put them in a different folder so that you can go through them and pick out the good ones and do your project. So what you'd actually do is you'd use ls, which will give you a list of all the files.
Oh, okay.
And you can actually pipe the output from the first command you run into another command.
Wow.
And one of the really common ones is there's one called sed, which is short for stream editor.
Okay.
And awk, which I don't know what that's short for. But you can use them to mangle the text that they're given.
Yeah.
So you can say ls, and then there's a pipe. It's a bar. It's on everybody's keyboard, and only Linux people, Unix people really use it for anything. But it says, don't tell me the output. Just send it to the next command in the chain.
Yeah.
And so you can use sed, and you can say anything that ends in MP4 or MPEG, just ignore it, because we're not doing anything with it right now. Or you can do it the other way around, and you can say, only tell me things that end in .jpeg or .ping.
Yeah.
And you can then put another pipe, and you put CP for copy at the end. And so what you've done is you've said, list all the files, do an operation, only tell me about the ones that meet this naming convention or with this extension, and then you pass it to another command, copy, to copy it away to a new place.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you've written a program. That's what that is.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
It's a program that you didn't save anywhere, but you basically set up a program. That's all a program is. You tell it, you're a program, you get this, and you do this, and you output that, and then you're done. And that's all a program is in the end. But when you write a script like that, so like I gave the example, we're going to filter out all the pictures, and we're going to copy them.
Yeah.
And then I use that same command. I press up arrow, so it brings it back up. And I hit backspace a couple times, and I say, this time, only video files, and we're going to copy to another place. and then I hit enter again, and I've changed the script, and I've run it again, and I still haven't saved it anywhere.
Yeah.
But it's great because you'll build tools that way. You'll have a certain string that you really like, and then you'll change it to do whatever you're doing right now. And a lot of guys I know, they'll actually start a little text file, and they'll put all of these little scripts that they use, and they'll put them in there, maybe with some comments so that they can remember, well, this is what I usually do with this one, and I could probably do this. That would be cool. I don't have time today.
Yeah.
And they'll save a big file, and you write a script book of just things you do. And it's really neat, because the more you do that, the better you understand the tools that you're using. And then one day you realize, I fired up my computer this morning, and I fired up a little text terminal, and I made it full screen, and I've been working in it for 9 hours, and I never once resized it. I never once touched my mouse.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I assume like Linux is more, sorry about that, is more like driving a manual car as opposed to Windows, which is an automatic where everything's done for you. You have more
That's
control.
actually a really good metaphor, because a lot of people come into it and say, I don't want to because it's more work.
Yeah.
But then if you drive a manual car, even if you don't really know anything about engines, you'll start to learn things about how transmissions work and how your clutch works without knowing how the machine works.
Yeah.
You'll know that if I let my clutch out too fast, my engine stalls.
Yeah.
If I let my clutch out too slow or not all the way, it'll skip and it'll grind and make this terrible noise. And you don't know that there's the clutch plates that press together to transmit the force, and you don't need to know that.
Yeah.
You just know how it works.
Yeah.
So yeah, you fire up a text terminal one day to do a few things that you read, and next thing you know all these commands you can string together, and there's all sorts of great things you can do. Like you could type up a whole command and at the end put ampersand, and it's a shorthand for Linux and most Unixes that says, do the next part only if everything worked so far.
Okay.
It'll like if I use in my example again of the ls and the sed and copy, I could put in at the end ampersand remove picture files.
Yeah.
That way it'll look at the directory, it'll filter out only the names of picture files, it'll copy them to this other place, and then if all of that worked, it'll remove them here. But if there was a problem, like it got halfway through the copy and then there wasn't enough room to wherever I was copying it to, and it bailed,
yeah,
it'll bail on everything. It won't remove anything.
Oh.
Which is, it's a good example, because you don't want to remove your picture files if you only copied 3/4 of them to the place you're saving them. You
Yeah.
want to know, so you can come in and go, oh, I got to free up some more space or copy it to somewhere else. There's another one. If you just put 1 ampersand, it says, don't do any checking. Just run this too.
Yeah.
And so you can run copy, ampersand, copy, ampersand, copy, and those 3 copies will all run at the same time. It shoots all 3 of them out, and they all start running. And hopefully you didn't tell it to copy the same thing 3 times, because they'll race to copy the files away.
No, that's cool. So, again, I guess you have more control in what you're doing. Probably get more satisfaction because under Linux.
Manuals generally, if I remember right, get better fuel mileage. And a lot of the people that drive manuals swear by it because they have more control over the car.
Oh, yeah. And the same thing with Linux then.
And once you get used to getting in there and stringing your commands together and doing little scripts, you're like, gosh, I hate dragging and dropping because you do it one way.
Yeah.
And if you want to do it a little differently, you're out of luck.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I'm going to assume that Linux and Unix, again, are the same thing. So my question is, are they more stable than Windows and probably even Mac OS?
They shouldn't be.
They
not
shouldn't.
anymore.
Not
Everybody should be really, really, really stable at this point in the game.
They should be.
Yeah. 20 years ago, Windows made decisions in 9X, Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows Millennium. They made decisions so that their stuff would run on the computers of the day.
Yeah.
Which compared to the computers today were just absolute garbage.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was one of those, they had to work with what they had. And so they made decisions that weren't really great, but they got the job done.
Yeah.
And those days are long behind us. If you go out and you pick up a laptop or a desktop today, you should be able to turn that on and have it do things, and it should run for, weeks or months without you needing to fuss with it.
Yeah.
And Windows is almost there.
Well, that's the thing, because you run at home and even at your business, your main stuff that has the least amount of problems, if I remember correctly, is the stuff that's running Linux as opposed to Windows.
Yeah, at my house, my router
Yeah.
is a virtual machine running Linux. Or no, wait, it's a virtual machine running FreeBSD, which is a cousin. But it is actually a Unix.
That is, BSD is Unix then.
Yep.
Okay.
It's the Berkeley software distribution.
That's originally where Unix was developed then, right?
Yeah, AT&T, back when there was only one, there is again, but it's a different one.
Yeah.
But when there was only one AT&T in the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, they wrote Unix to do intensive computing stuff related to the telephone network. And they gave it away kind of free to major universities, because major universities needed to do computing stuff too. And those were in the days when you would have a big mainframe that did all the work, and it was the size of a refrigerator.
Yes.
And it cost you $100,000.
Yeah.
And then you'd have little terminals all over the campus that people would use to log into that same mainframe.
Yeah.
And like going back to when we were talking about 9X, 9X doesn't understand the concept of there being more than one person.
Oh.
When you run Windows 98, you are the person at the keyboard.
Yeah.
And you can set a password, but you can still get around it really easily because it didn't understand the idea that there were multiple people that would use the same computer.
Oh.
And, I mean, there weren't permissions on files. So if you had your computer running Windows 98 and I came in and, you know, got past the login and got in, I could read and write all of your files. And the computer didn't even really keep track of who did it.
Oh.
It just ran.
Yeah.
And in the Unix world, that would be that's unthinkable.
Yeah.
Because most of the system is run by and owned by root, which is the system.
Yes.
And then you have a user, and your user is allowed to read and write files that your user can read and write. You can't just go read a file. If the permissions aren't set on it, it'll just flat out say no. Read this file? No. Write this file? Absolutely not. Log me out? Sure, you can do that.
Yeah.
So the idea of these per user permissions was kind of a new thing to Microsoft, and they've done a really, really great job. I'll give them total credit. In 20 years, they've come from having no idea about user and user permissions to doing a pretty good job most of the time.
Yeah.
And Linux and Unix had 30 years before anybody really started giving them a hard time about it. So, to be fair, Windows is in a good place given the amount of time it's had.
So, I mean, but again, you're still using it at your job and at home for your main system, I guess, for what everything runs off of is Linux.
Actually, the main computer I sit at home runs Windows most of the time.
It runs Windows. That's just for like entertainment or other things. Games. But for other things, though, you still use Unix.
Yep.
For like your
so I have
storage, I guess.
Big virtualization machine that runs all the virtual machines that do all the things around the house on my network.
Yeah.
And that's VMware, which is based on based on Linux.
Yes.
And then I have a storage machine up on my network, and that's based on FreeBSD. And then my router is based on FreeBSD.
I was going to say, yeah.
And there's a bunch of different virtual machines out on the network doing things that are all Linux machines.
Now, like stability and everything like that, then also for security reasons, wouldn't Linux be a lot better than Windows still, or no?
So people will tell you that Linux is better because the code is reviewed by lots of people.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that it's theoretically true.
Yeah.
You can grab the source, and I can grab the source, and we can look through it.
Yeah.
But the problem is the number of people that can actually look at that source and then follow it and see what it does and understand clever little tricks in there. There's not that many of them, and most of them are really busy.
Oh.
And so you'd have to pay somebody to go through the source for you and try to find any tricks or traps. So it's one of those, the argument sounds good, but then when you actually put it to the test, it doesn't hold up. I like being able to go and grab the source and take a look at it. I like that also for the reason that I can change it.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, you can change with Linux. And plus, if there's a problem, you always have people that are diehard fans like yourself,
right,
who will go in and will see mistakes much quicker than you will get fixes on Windows or
not necessarily finding things that are wrong, but one of the things I do like is that if you have a program that you use, like on Windows, I use a program called C Display.
Yeah.
To read my comic book collection. I have a digital comic book collection. I love it.
Yeah.
under Windows, my favorite comic book reader is called C Display.
Mm-hmm.
It was written by a guy who died in a car accident 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Nobody has the source code for it. Nobody.
Oh.
The guy died. And nobody found out for like 2 or 3 years, and I'm not sure if it was his wife or his parents or whoever came in and cleaned up the estate, basically wiped the computer and sold it, or gave it away or something. We don't know.
Yeah.
And so there's this program out on the web, and it's never been updated.
Oh.
It never will be.
Okay.
Which is a shame, because it's really, really well done.
Yeah.
But no one can update it. No one can fix it. So if, there's something new, there's some new format of file, or, we have a new way of showing pictures on a screen, C Display will never get it. Or if they, God forbid, they find a security hole in it, you're stuck with it forever.
Yeah.
Whereas with Linux, one of the clauses of the GPL, the GNU public license, the thing that almost all Linux-related software is released under, it says that when you write a program or make changes to a program that's already under this license, you have to give the source code to your changes to anyone that you give the modified program to.
Because it's open source.
Right. And that's how this license works. So I can download the source code for Linux,
mm-hmm.
and if I make a change and I give you that changed kernel, and you come back to me and you say, hey, I need to see the source and the changes that you made, I have to give them to you.
Yeah.
Now, you'd have to get a lawyer if I said no, and most people won't do that, but that is the law. Not the law. That's the agreement. That's the license. And so if I said, no, I don't feel like it, I made my changes, they're awesome, I don't have to show them to you, I'm actually breaking the license.
Oh. Well, see,
in theory, you could go get a lawyer and come after me, but
not going to happen, no.
Most people don't bother.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you want something, a piece of hardware to work, I assume, like a graphics card or your guitar or your video equipment, you could probably, with Linux, you could make your own software, I assume.
Well, that's the interesting part. Using your example, if you wanted to write a driver, something that didn't have one before, the first thing you need is a huge stack of paperwork from the people that made the hardware. Because you need to understand it all the way down.
Yeah.
It's not enough to have driven an automatic. You need to know how a clutch works
if
you're going to build a new one.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing you need to know is you need to know the hardware you're talking about really, really, really well.
Okay.
Usually that means paying a decent chunk of money to the guys that originally built the hardware, and they'll ship you out, a big crate full of books that describe everything about how it works. Then you could sit down and, if it was like an evenings and weekends project, you're probably looking at a couple of years before you're done the driver. They're usually really big projects. But in the real world, the example is more like sound cards. Under Windows, a sound card is kind of a funny thing, because if you go out and buy the latest Sound Blaster Z2 Remix, or whatever it's called, the latest super shiny sound card, when you get home, you can go on their website and you can download a driver, and it'll be available for every version of Windows that's currently on the market. And it's not going to be available for any old versions of Windows.
Yeah.
And then you're probably going to get updates for a couple months to a couple of years.
Yeah.
Or you can go to their website and you can download a new driver, and it'll do new things, and it supports the new update of Windows 10 or whatever. And sometimes they'll even have new features.
Yeah.
But then when they stop selling that card, before long, they stop making driver updates for that card because they don't really care about it anymore.
No.
And you'll get to a point where you're like, oh, I need to get the new latest 6.0 driver to work with Windows 11.
Yeah.
But there isn't one.
Yeah.
Oh, well. And you take your card out and you throw it away and you buy a new one that still has support.
Yeah, that's...
Under Linux, you'll have a driver that used to work. And so it's a starting place. Even if you're not that good, if you're good...
You can make your own driver.
You couldn't write a driver from scratch.
Yeah.
But if you have one that used to work, you can probably go in there and you can probably tinker around a little bit and make the changes you need to keep it working.
See, that's the thing I like about, not that I know enough about Linux, but what I've learned from you is that you have more control over your OS than you do under Windows or even Mac OS. I assume I got that right?
Definitely Mac OS, because Mac OS, you pretty much install it, and there's not a lot of knobs to tinker with.
Yeah.
If you decide, there's printer support in Mac OS, and I don't have a printer, and I'm never going to have a printer, and I don't want to have a printer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
So doesn't matter. under Windows, you can go in and there's a lot of stuff you can remove or disable.
Yeah.
Under Linux, you could go in and you could actually patch things out and remove anything you want. There are people who are blind who have patched out all of the things that draw to a screen. They don't even have a screen on their computer because they're blind.
Oh,
what do they
yeah.
need a screen for?
That's true.
But you can set it up so that it reads when instead of putting up text on the screen, it'll actually read it off to you and it'll sound it out. And they'll have Braille text readers so that you could go back up the screen and read some text just by running your finger over it.
See, that's because you have control over it, unlike...
Right.
Now, I'm surprised now Unix doesn't give you that much freedom as I thought it did. It's just an old operating system that's pretty damn stable, I guess.
It's pretty damn stable, and anybody can take it apart and put it back together.
So Unix you can do that with.
Yep.
But it's just
Yeah,
cost.
you can go down to the nuts and bolts, and you can change anything you want.
Now, that's one thing you can't do with the other operating systems that are popular, like Windows and Mac OS, because that stuff's locked off. Or
Mac OS especially. You install it, and it stays installed, and it's done. And there's nothing you can do to really change things. I mean, you can change the color of your windows, and you can change the font a little bit, but that's the paint.
Yeah, it's a limited control.
Beyond that, you really don't get a lot of control to change things. You can't remove components or subsystems. They say, no, don't do that. You're not supposed to do that. Don't do it. Stop.
Yeah.
Windows gives you a little bit of control because it'll let you disable things, but not necessarily remove them.
Yeah, that's...
If you start removing things, a lot of times it'll break because it assumes everything's going to be there.
That's true. Actually, years ago, wasn't Explorer like embedded into the OS? Like you couldn't remove
Still
it.
is.
It still is. Oh, I didn't know that.
The big fuss years and years ago was Internet Explorer.
Yeah, Explorer.
Microsoft said every copy of Windows that we ever write has to come with Internet Explorer.
Yeah.
And basically, the entire world turned and went, come again? That doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
What the real reason was that Microsoft wanted everybody in the world to have Internet Explorer on their Windows computer without having to ask for it.
Yeah.
They wanted it to be there when you first started so that, of course, you're going to use it. It's already there. It's in the box.
Yes.
Because I don't know that many people that ever really liked Internet Explorer.
Not many.
So, yeah, they said, well, it has to be there. It's part of the operating system. And everybody sort of rolled their eyes and went, how does that work again? And Microsoft said, here, we'll show you.
Yeah.
And they real quick mashed Internet Explorer and Windows Explorer together.
Okay,
They had been like siblings before. They used a lot of the same parts. But now Microsoft mashed them together so that they literally were the same thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know. Microsoft, I stopped using it years ago, I guess, now, officially. There was a long time that I was using it, and then I stopped, and I was using it again. But I've been using Mac OS for almost 10 years now, I guess. But I would like to learn more about Linux. I mean, I learned from you how it started out.
Well, like I said, it's a tool. They're all tools.
Yeah.
And you have to look at what you want to do. And then usually it's not that hard to figure out what the best tool is.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Linux. I use it for lots of things. I've run it as my main OS on my desktop at home for great long lengths of time.
I know.
But I love playing video games.
Yeah, that's the only reason Microsoft's still in the
I love
loop.
firing up the latest video game.
Yeah.
Right now I'm playing Destiny 2. It only exists for Windows.
Unfortunately.
So I've got to have a Windows machine around.
Well, back in the day when we were playing id Software with Doom and stuff, that stuff was actually written under Linux, I think you said.
Kind of.
There
was a really great guy, Timothy Bassett, used to work at id Software. And he was a big fan of Linux. And so he had access to the source code.
Oh.
For Quake 3, for example. And so it was really, really easy for him to get it up and running on Linux.
Yeah.
He would change a few things here and there. He'd tweak a few things, compile it up, and it ran. And he threw it on the internet and said, hey, guys, I think it works. Give it a shot. At that point, nobody else in the world outside of id Software had the source code to Quake 3. So nobody else could do that kind of thing. But because of the work he did, there were Linux clients, and then years later, once nobody was buying the Quake 3 engine to make new games on anymore, they actually open sourced the game engine, which was really, really awesome of them because since they did that, there have been a good dozen shooters that came out for Linux that were written from scratch in Linux as Linux projects. Like you can get them for Windows, but they were written on Linux to run on Linux, and they run on Linux best.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because even the program I'm running now is completely different, but this Audacity is made under Linux and then was ported later on to other OSs, I assume.
I actually don't even know what OS Audacity was written on first, but I know at this point there are a bunch of different people that work on it, and they work on it with, I know there's some Linux guys, and I know there's some Mac guys. I think they still have a Windows guy or two.
But it's mainly the other platforms then.
Yeah, and that's the great thing. Once your piece of software gets popular enough, and once enough people are running it, what computer you wrote it for in the first place matters less and less.
That's true. Actually, I'm curious, too, because when going back to the gaming thing, because I swore back in the day, maybe it's still true, that even Sony with their PlayStation, they wrote their stuff and developed it on Linux, I thought. No.
Might have been. I don't know well enough to say.
Yeah, because I know they had that developer kit back in the day, too.
I feel much better about not muting my phone earlier because Walter just muted his phone.
Yes. Whoops. I forgot. I thought I did.
I thought I did, too.
Yeah.
I will just edit that out.
Well, I don't know what to say. Actually, like at work, I thought you said like the stuff that runs, I assume the smoothest is stuff that's running Linux at your job.
Well, it's one of those form following function kind of things. Like our AIX boxes at work are spectacular.
Yeah.
AIX is a real breeze to work with. It's a really old Unix. It's actually kind of crufty and old-fashioned in the way it does things, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it works great because the only hardware that it's running on are these really big, expensive, over-engineered IBM, almost a mainframe. And it's really spectacular. Whereas Linux on similar machines is really, really great. It's great to work with. It's great to deal with. It's very stable. It runs really well. And then as you start cheaping out on the hardware, it's less and less and less awesome.
Oh.
So like if you go out and grab a cheap laptop or a cheap desktop and you put Linux on it, that's great. And you might need to reboot it every couple of weeks because the hardware it lives on isn't that good.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like if you bought a sports car and then you bought the cheapest tires they have at Sam's Club.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I don't understand. Every time I put the gas pedal down, the tires just spin and spin. And
it's
like, well, yeah, you've got cheap, lousy tires on there, man. They're going to do that. Whereas if you have a sports car and you put really great high-performance rubber on it, it runs so much better. It grips the road. It corners so tight. It accelerates so well. It brakes so well. Versus the, cheapies you got at Sam's Club. Well, that makes sense.
Well, actually, I thought like Linux runs best on anything, even old stuff or cheaper stuff.
So there's two sides to that coin, though.
Okay.
Because Linux is open, because anybody can get the source code, you can get it to run on just about anything. You can also get it to run on a whole lot of things that it really should never have been running on.
Like my laptop, no.
Well, I was actually thinking of... there's a lot of little project boards. BeagleBone makes a bunch. The most popular one are probably the Raspberry Pi systems.
Yes, yeah.
And they're really cool for what they are.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that you could go out with $20 and buy a little circuit board, and it's an entire computer.
Yeah.
It's got a CPU, it's got memory, it's got an Ethernet jack, it's got a couple of USB ports. There's everything you need there. There's even an HDMI port so you could plug in a monitor.
Yeah.
You could plug a mouse and a keyboard into the USB ports, plug a network cable in, and it's a computer.
Yeah, I've seen those. Micro Center and stuff has it.
But if you start drawing a desktop with it, if you start running a web browser, oh gosh.
It's going to hurt.
It's kind of ugly.
Yeah.
Because that little tiny board with that little tiny computer built into it only has, say, 256 or 512 megs or maybe a gig or two of RAM if you're really lucky.
Yeah.
Whereas the $250 Walmart special this Black Friday is going to have 8 gigs of RAM.
Yeah.
If it has one.
Yeah.
Last year everything had 4 or often 6. This coming year, I bet you're going to find Black Friday computers at $200, $250 that have 8 gigs of RAM in them.
I think that's where they are now. I think even this one I have now was about that price, and it did come with 8 gigs of RAM. That's becoming standard.
Yeah. Whereas these little project boards may have a gig.
Yeah, that's
maybe
true.
2 if you're lucky.
That's true.
So it depends on what you're doing with it too. Like
Yeah.
I have a Raspberry Pi. It sits on my network at home. It's spectacular. It's so fun.
Yeah.
It's this tiny little machine, and I use SSH, the secure shell, and I log into it.
Yeah.
And so my little text window at that point is running on that tiny little computer board.
That's funny.
And I can just tuck it in a corner somewhere. It doesn't have speakers. It doesn't have a monitor. It doesn't need a big power supply. Just a network cable and a power cable, and then stuff it in the corner somewhere and forget all about it. But you can log into it over the network, and it's great because it's like a computer that doesn't take up any space. It doesn't sit anywhere. It's invisible. And there are jobs you can have for them that they're really, really great at. Like my little just sits on the network, doesn't do anything computer. I'll leave it running for 2 or 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
And then remember it's there, log into it. Oh, apply some updates. I should probably reboot. But I didn't reboot because it wasn't running right. I didn't reboot because there was a problem. I rebooted because the updates wanted me to.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I mean, that's going back to Linux versus Windows. That Windows, you do have to reboot more often than Linux or Unix.
So, the flip side of that coin, the counter example, is I have another Raspberry Pi, exactly the same hardware, and it's plugged into my TV in my basement. And it's got a pair of controllers plugged into it, and it plays emulators. It plays old NES and Super NES and Genesis games, and they look great on the TV.
Yeah.
And I don't have to swap cartridges out or anything, so my kids can play it, and they can just switch games anytime they want.
Yeah.
And that sucker has to get rebooted every day or two.
Oh,
if
it does.
you're actually using it, something will get stuck.
Oh.
The emulator will crash, and the screen is all purple. And what you do, you turn the power off at the wall. You wait a few seconds, you turn the power back on at the wall.
So you are rebooting it then.
And it has to do with what you're asking it to do.
Oh.
In that case, the graphics controller in a Raspberry Pi is basic because it had to be really small and had to use very little electricity and it had to be super cheap.
Yeah.
Whereas on my desktop at home, I have a graphics card that costs $750.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm going to expect that to run emulators all friggin' day and never need to be turned off and on again. I'll accept a little trouble from the $20 computer under my TV.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Now, that's the thing. I'm sure, like, it seems like I wanted to go to even, like, when you got Windows, they use source code in Windows, I believe, of Unix, some source code. And Sort of, and in Mac is pretty much Unix underneath the hood. It's running, what was it?
Mac OS is a Unix because they were like, hey, we're Apple, we've got money. Let's get that certification and be a real Unix.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody somewhere, someday, will care. And that'll make it worth the $5,000, whatever it is.
Well, that's what I'm kind of curious about because Unix is was the birth child or whatever you want to call it of all, like, computers. So why go back to Unix? Is there anything else out there that's gonna
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Windows and Mac OS
because
they both, I'm gonna say stole is not the right word. You can't steal something that's free.
No,
but the operating system FreeBSD has really, really great networking support.
Okay.
Not just like drivers for network cards, but the actual stuff that does the networking work inside the machine, the address resolution and routing protocols, and in particular, I'm thinking of BSD sockets.
Yeah.
Which are a nifty programming trick so that you can send and receive stuff over the network without having to work too much on it.
Yeah.
BSD has really, really great socket support, and that was a major problem for Windows in the old days.
Okay.
Now, the neat thing is BSD is under a very different license than Linux. I mentioned the GPL, the standard Linux license that everybody thinks of.
Yeah.
It's open, and it forces you to be open.
Yeah.
If you use GPL code to build your project has to be open too. At least the parts of it that touched any of that open code.
Yeah.
BSD has a completely different kind of license. There's actually two that you'll run into, the MIT license and the Apache license.
I've heard of Apache.
The MIT license basically says, this is a license. Have a nice day. Oh, by the way, don't remove the license.
Okay.
I'm paraphrasing because I'm not a lawyer, but that's basically all it says.
You just got to know it's there. You don't pay for it or anything, I guess.
You don't pay for it. It doesn't put any conditions on you. It doesn't say anything about how you can use it. It doesn't say anything about you have to keep this license on there. It basically just says you're not allowed to remove this label.
That's fine, though, for free.
And so when Mac OS could have used some updated socket support, and when Windows had meh socket support and they wanted something better, this was right around the time of Code Red and Nimda, which were big network attacks. And
okay.
They beat on, especially Windows XP had old, nasty networking support that was left over. It was like a mess of patches at that point.
Yeah.
The guys that had written the original software were long gone, and people had just been patching it and patching it and patching it and patching it to keep it working. And it was like if you had an inner tube to put in your pool.
Yeah.
And every time it got a nick or a cut, you'd get one of those little patch kits and put it on there.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Well, after 30 years or whatever, there's nothing left but patches. It's a ring made out of patches.
Yes.
There's no original rubber left.
Yeah.
And that was Windows networking in the mid to late 90s. It was kind of a mess. And they looked over at FreeBSD, which had some really, really great networking subsystems, and they said, hey, did anyone ever notice that the license doesn't say you can't do anything?
Yeah.
And they were like, that's really neat. And so they grabbed the source code for FreeBSD and ripped out the networking pieces they needed and rewrote it a little bit so that it fit the Windows-shaped hole and just plonked it on in there.
And started charging you for it, too.
Well, they were charging you for it the whole time.
Well, that's true.
But the only thing that changed is there's a little block of text that you'll see in a lot of places hidden in Windows, at the bottom of a big screen full of stuff. There'll be the little copyright and trademark, Microsoft 2018.
Yeah.
Portions of this code licensed from the Regents of the University of California at Berkeley. And
Unix.
That piece of text says, hey, you know what? I came out of FreeBSD.
See, that's what's interesting. You're talking an old operating system, the first one, and it's still around, and it surpasses even the new stuff, it looks like.
It depends on what you're using it for.
That's true.
But yeah, there are things like networking. The networking support in Unix operating systems tends to be really, really good.
That's weird. I mean, so if it's not broken, don't fix it kind of deal, I guess.
It has to do with where it's used, too.
Oh.
Like I said, I use Linux and AIX at work.
Yeah.
None of those machines have a graphical desktop on them.
So
None
it doesn't
of them
matter.
have mice or keyboards.
Yeah.
None of them have sound cards or speakers. So that support could be absolutely garbage, and I'd never know.
Oh.
Because it doesn't even come into the picture at work. At work, we care about, does the machine stay up?
Yeah.
Does it run the programs we tell it to? Does it keep running those programs even if the whole world is on fire?
Yeah.
And does it stay up on the network, and is the networking bulletproof and solid? And if it hits all those check boxes, that's the kind of tool we need.
Well, that's why
Unix checks those boxes.
Yeah, you use Unix, Linux, and some Windows systems, but mostly Linux and Unix, I guess, for your security.
I won't say where I work because that's confidential.
Yeah.
But I believe the numbers are something like 500 AIX servers and something like 1,500, I'll say 1,000 Linux servers, and then there's like 750 Windows servers.
Which is not that many, then, for the Windows servers.
It's funny because they do different things.
Yeah.
And like there's portions that run programs that you can only get for Windows, because the software we run, we don't write all of it.
Okay.
We get it from Siemens or GE or big
clients.
Companies. And they write the software that works with their hardware.
Okay.
And then we have to run it.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can get a Unix version for AIX, or we can get a Linux version for Linux, which is very common. Linux support's getting really good. But sometimes they say, no, we only make our program for Microsoft Windows.
So that's why the Windows...
And so we have a Windows team, and we have a bunch of Windows servers, and what their job is to run anything that Linux can.
Well, that's the thing. There's only a small portion at your job that runs the Windows.
I think it's the second biggest group. So
Second.
It's like I said, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it's like 1,000 Linux servers. It's like 750 Windows servers, and then it's like 500 AIX real Unix servers.
Wow. But that's still...
That's kind of the split based on what we can get.
Okay.
If it was a perfect world and we were telling everybody to write software for us, we'd have a lot more of those AIX machines because they are really great to work with.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I mean, because you're making bigger and faster and stronger hardware, so to speak, but we're still using what works best, which is an old and ancient at this point operating system or operating systems.
It's great-great-grandchildren of
yeah,
really old operating systems.
So it just goes back to, like, I guess still the best is the older stuff. I mean, that's what, they might make a different desktop look to it, but it's still running an old operating system if you're using a desktop.
So when I go to work, the company I work for, they're throwing around huge numbers for support and for their licensing and for all those things. So just a day in the life of the company I work for is hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars moving around in the economy. Yeah. And that's not all Linux money, but there are numbers thrown around that as an individual they would just be insane.
Yeah.
A couple jobs back, I had to contact a guy that wrote an audio library program that worked with our voice over IP phones.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, everybody has one of those little phones on their desk, and you pick it up and you can dial an extension or you can hit 9 and get an outside line. Nobody cares.
Okay.
But those were all hardware gadgets that reached out to a Linux server that actually did all of the switching and phone line management to make them go.
Yeah.
Well, one of the pieces of software on there was released for Red Hat Enterprise Linux and one other that weren't what we were using. And so we contacted the guy that wrote it, and we were like, hey, here at place I used to work at, we're running Ubuntu Linux.
Okay.
And it's a real bear to use your audio library because it's only released for Red Hat.
Yeah.
And he wrote back to us in an email, and he said, well, that's a project. It wouldn't be too big. I would need about 3 days of my work paid for, and then I could make it for Ubuntu as well.
Okay.
And we were like, okay, what's a day of your work worth? And he wrote back with some big number. It was a 4-digit dollar number. Wow. And that's what one of his days was worth. And we looked at it, and it was like $5,000 or $6,000 or something. And they were like, but then it'll make everything just work on our network. And how much time will it save us each year? And how much is that time worth? Sure, yeah. You go over to the lady that's in the accounting group and tell her you need her to pay this guy $6,000.
Yeah.
And it was like, boom, done.
It's not that bad, actually. That's not that much money for a company.
I had to cough up $6,000.
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
That's true.
I mean, my motorcycle wasn't a lot more than that, and I'm on a 5-year financing plan to cover that purchase because it's for one person, that's a lot of money.
For one person is. For a company, it's not.
It's change.
Yeah.
They lose that in the sofa and they don't care.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the guys running around with these really huge amounts of money that determine what gets worked on.
Okay.
And so the more business sexy, with the air quotes again.
Yeah,
the more business sexy your software is, the more likely it is to get some of that money, the more likely it is to get worked on, the more likely it is to work great.
Okay. Oh, get a little bit of background talking. That's the thing. I mean, is Linux going to actually... I mean, it's come very far from where it was years ago. Is it going to be more like in the home users available? I mean, or more home users are going to be using that as opposed to other operating systems? Seems like it's very stable for work.
Well, it depends on what you're using it for. I bet you just about everybody listening is actually using Unix right now, or Linux at that matter, because both the Xbox 360... Actually, now I'm thinking about that. That may not be true. But the PS4... The PS4 is definitely running a Unix.
I thought so. I thought it was Linux, but Unix would make sense.
Linux-based.
Yeah, so at least on your consoles and stuff, you're using Unix. Mm-hmm. But I mean, years ago, I definitely wouldn't be able to run Linux like you were when you first introduced it to me.
Well, here's a funny one for you. If you remember way back at the beginning, I said... you're running Linux, but you don't talk to Linux because all it does is run the computer.
Yeah.
You stack other things on top of it to draw a desktop and work with your mouse and talk to your speakers.
Yeah.
Something like 60% of the cell phones in America are running Android.
Yeah, what is Android?
Android uses the Linux kernel
Oh, I didn't know that.
But it doesn't use any of the other Linux software.
Okay.
So when you look at your Android phone, way deep down in there on the little board inside the phone that's doing all the work, that's the Linux kernel running there doing it.
Yeah.
But then everything else on top of it was written for you by Google or Samsung or LG.
Okay, so that's like the GUI, so to speak.
So when you see the GUI and you're swiping right and swiping left to look at your desktops, that's something that Google wrote, but it's running on top of the Linux kernel.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Linux, of all things, though, that's what's kind of really cool.
Well, there was a good reason for that.
It's stable.
It's free.
Free. Oh, yes.
Keeps the costs down.
Well, that's the thing. Now OSs are kind of free, minus Microsoft. I think they are still giving it out, so to speak, for
Microsoft
free.
is like lying to themselves about how free Windows is now.
Yeah.
Because if you have a computer that's ever had any legitimate version of Windows paid for on it, you can upgrade to Windows 10 for free pretty easily.
That part, yeah, you do. Speaking of which...
But Microsoft doesn't want to say those words out loud because then it's true.
Well, they charge a lot for their licenses when they do charge it. Speaking of which, like you have a business, what is the difference between... Because Microsoft's biggest selling license, I guess, is Office.
Yep.
Now, Linux has a version of Office that's very similar. Several.
There are several versions.
And they're open source and they're free.
Some are.
Some are.
Some aren't.
Okay.
Basically, if you go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, everybody wanted to have something that wasn't Office because a lot of the people at that point remembered the 1980s. And in the 1980s, there was no Office yet. And the first big fight was, I'm thinking it was Lotus 123.
I remember that.
And I can't remember who there was that came up and fought them for it. But before there was ever Microsoft Office, there were the different components that are in it.
Yeah.
And there was WordPerfect and Lotus Notes and Lotus Word and Abbey Word and all these different programs doing these different things. And it was funny because Microsoft came in and it didn't do anything better than everyone else, but it did everything pretty good.
Microsoft.
Good enough.
Yeah.
And it turned out that you could get a decent spreadsheet and a decent word processor and a decent email client. You just look for that box that says Microsoft Office on the front and buy that.
Yeah, and it's expensive.
And it was really funny because that was never supposed to be a big, huge product when Microsoft started making it.
But that's where they make their money, I think, isn't it?
It is now.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the plan in the beginning.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It was just patching a hole so that you could buy Microsoft Windows, and then you could buy Microsoft Office, and then you could buy the Microsoft web browser, and you could buy the Microsoft this and that and the everything. And the idea was that you could live your whole life using only Microsoft products.
Yeah, which I don't kind of like. PowerPoint's a big seller, too. I think your one friend likes using that.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy. PowerPoint didn't exist in the first versions of Office.
Yeah, it didn't. It didn't. That's an add-on later.
Its own industry.
But then can you get that for a version for Linux that would be not costing you anything? And
so
is good?
You can't get PowerPoint.
Okay.
But if you want a presentation software, if you want something that kind of works the same, where you can put graphics up and you can put your little clip art in and you can type some text and you can set it so that when you hit the right arrow on your little remote, it goes to the next slide.
Yeah.
There's tons.
See, that's the interesting thing. So you can get that stuff for Linux, and it won't cost you an arm and a leg. It won't cost you anything, basically, I guess.
A lot of times it won't cost you anything at all.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Sometimes it does. There is commercial software for Linux that you can't just download and run. You have to actually buy it.
But it's probably not that expensive, relatively speaking, compared to what you're getting charged with.
It depends on what it is.
Okay.
Because you get back into software like that audio library I was talking about for our phone system.
Yeah.
Your end user, Walter with a computer, he's never going to use it.
No.
Me, a guy with half a dozen computers, I'm never going to use it.
Oh.
But that company with 500 people with voice over IP phones on every desk, oh yeah, they live and die by it.
You want to save money somehow, though.
And so it's funny because you don't pay for that audio library.
Yeah.
But if you're using it to support your 500 employees, you have to pay somebody to support it because if it goes down, your company goes down.
Well, that's true.
So,
but what's going to save you more money if Linux makes it or Unix makes something, it'd be a lot more cost effective, I guess.
Well, that's where you need to get an accountant on the show.
Oh.
And they'll explain to you how it works. But basically, the accountants sit down and they work out the numbers. And they say, it costs us this many dollars a day just to do the things we do.
Yeah.
And if we spend this much more, then we can cut those costs by this much. And if you can cut the costs more than that first spend,
Yeah.
it'll end up being a better deal in the long run.
Well, that's true. And plus, going back to, again, I would assume a Unix-based program, even a program made under Unix for Unix or Linux, would probably run a lot more smoothly than one for Microsoft, maybe, or about the same.
Yeah, it depends on what they're doing.
Oh, that's true,
Because
too.
all my video games run on Windows.
That's the only thing, yeah, go back to the horrible thing of Windows and stuff.
Well, it's not even a technical thing there.
Yeah.
I've played top tier AAA games
Yeah.
on Linux that run great.
Okay.
So the stuff you need to do the job is there.
Yeah.
There are companies whose only job is to take. Last year it was Middle Earth, Shadow of Mordor. It was a big AAA game, sold for like $75 when it came out. Everybody had to have it. It was on Xbox, it was on PS4, it was on Windows PCs.
Yes.
And there's a company called Feral Interactive that their entire business is taking games for Windows or whatever and making them run on Mac OS or Linux or both.
Yeah.
And so the company will pay them a big chunk of money and let them have access to the source code, and they'll make a version.
Okay.
And so it was funny. They came along and they were like, yeah, I got all the source code, Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor, no problem. Here you go, Linux version. It was, I don't think it was even 6 full months later.
Oh, wow.
There was a delay. I mean, you bought the game and you played it on Windows because everybody's got to play it on the first week. But then after a fairly short period of time, you could play it on Linux. It was really great.
I'd rather play it on Linux if I could.
They made an updated version called Shadow of War with new stuff and new DLC and new loot boxes, all the shiny things. And they decided they didn't want to spend on a Linux client again. So there isn't one.
That kind of sucks then. Something that's been I've been thinking about too in the background here when we were talking, because you mentioned a lot about Windows, because I remember that story you told me years ago, and I want to let audience members who may listen in, is how Windows came up with I'm trying to think of it, the new NT, you know where I'm probably to go.
Oh God, that
the
is
story
its own show.
Well, I know. Maybe the short version, the abridged version of that story. Because I know I've said it wrong many times, but how that came about.
So a Brazilian years ago, in the late 1980s, IBM...
I love this story, too,
There's
by the
an
way.
earlier version of that story, too.
Yeah.
In the late 70s, early 1980s, IBM made a computer.
Yes.
And they wanted to sell it to everyone for only $5,000.
Which
it beeped and it had a screen. It showed letters. It was really spectacular. Everybody was so excited. It was a computer for your house.
Yes.
But the problem was they had nobody to write software to put on it.
Yeah.
And they met this annoying college dropout kid named Bill Gates. And he was like, hey, if you give me 3/4 of what you were going to offer, I can deliver all the things you want. And IBM was like, yeah, right, kid, pull the other one. And he was like, no, really, I'll show you a demo. And he trotted out this operating system that he had bought, like just bought it from this guy in Seattle, I think.
Yeah.
And he was like, look, I wrote this for you. It's great.
Yes.
And it ran up on the screen and said, welcome, IBM. And IBM was impressed. And they handed Bill a huge check. And he turned around and ran back to his people and went, we've got to write an operating system really fast because I already sold it.
Wait, is that OS2, though, or that's something?
No, this was before that. This was DOS.
That was DOS. Okay. Quick and dirty operating system?
Yeah, that was, rumor has it, that was the original nickname that the guy who wrote it gave it. And then Microsoft bought it from him for a song. It was like $200 or something.
Oh, wow.
And tore it all apart and built the DOS that we ended up seeing.
Yeah.
Out of the wreckage of this guy's goofy project.
Yeah, because DOS was used by everyone, and there was DOS Shell, I think it was called. Yeah.
Well, so fast forward a number of years, and Microsoft managed to buy this guy's project for a song and sell it for millions and millions of dollars. And that was the beginning of Microsoft as we know it.
Yes.
And years and years and years later, they came back to IBM, and they were like, we should write a really, really great operating system. And IBM was like, yeah, we've been kind of thinking about that. We've got some projects that could use it. And they got together and wrote IBM OS 2.
Okay.
And a lot of people really liked OS 2, But an even larger number of people never, ever heard about it because
Yeah.
they didn't care.
Yeah, and it still exists, OS, I think.
It does.
It's
it does.
not
Mostly
two,
it's in
it's-
ATM machines these days.
Okay, it's like OS 5 or something
No,
like that?
it's still OS 2.
Oh, it's OS 2.
But it's like version 52.
Oh, okay.
But Microsoft and IBM got together and they wanted to write the greatest operating system.
Yes.
And they wanted to keep it just for themselves.
Yeah.
If you went out and bought a Samsung computer, it wasn't going to be able to run OS 2 because OS 2 was just for Microsoft and IBM.
Okay.
IBM was going to use it to sell all their computers.
Yeah.
And so they wrote OS 2, and OS 2 was really cool. It came out before Windows 95 by some years, and it could run DOS programs just like it was DOS, and it could run Windows 3.1 programs better than Windows 3.1 could.
Yeah.
And then it could write any OS 2 programs you wrote. It could run those. And it was like, oh, this is really great.
Yeah.
And Microsoft said, oh, by the way, we forgot to mention we've got this new Windows 95 thing.
Yeah.
And Windows 95, you might not remember it because it was a long time ago
It
now.
was a long.
But it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Everybody was very excited. You'd turn on your computer and the graphics would start up like immediately. And there'd be loading screens and animations everywhere. It was spectacular. It was so excited.
Yeah, it piggybacked off of DOS, I believe.
The first versions, yeah, it booted DOS first and then DOS booted Windows.
Yes.
And
I
it was
remember
only
that.
later that they started pulling DOS out. Because
Oh.
they didn't want it. They didn't need it there, and it limited what they could do.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, IBM was sitting there holding OS 2 going, hey, guys, we had a thing. We were working on the thing here. And Microsoft was like, look, 95, Windows 95. It's great.
It was back in the day.
And IBM got really sulky. I mean, I can't blame them. They were supposed to be partners in this big project, and now Microsoft is selling this new, shinier, better sports car, and IBM got left out. And so nobody knows exactly what happened, but somebody at IBM got hurt feelings, and then somebody at Microsoft got hurt feelings, and back and forth, and the whole thing just flew to pieces.
Yeah.
Microsoft took the last copy of OS 2 that they both worked on, and they were like, we're taking our ball and we're going home. And IBM took the last copy that both of them worked on, and they were like, fine, be that way.
Yeah.
And IBM went back to their labs, and Microsoft went back to their labs, and I don't think they've really worked together since.
Well, I thought NT came out of that somehow.
Hold on, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Because that's my favorite story.
But IBM kept working on OS 2, and like I said, eventually it got into ATM machines, and it was really big in ATM machines. Because in an ATM machine, you don't ever have to install or remove anything.
Yeah.
You know exactly what it's going to do its whole life the day you first put it together. And OS 2 was really great for that. It was very Unix-like.
Yes.
It was really solid. It was really stable. It was no muss, no fuss, no nonsense. And you could pick hardware for your ATM machine that you knew worked really, really, really well, which is why even to this day, it's really unusual to walk up to an ATM machine and see a sign that says out of order.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, most of them aren't running OS 2 anymore. They're running different things, but the idea is when you're building an ATM machine, it doesn't need to have 3D graphics. It doesn't need to have surround sound. It just needs to work every day, all the time.
Yeah.
So an ATM machine can cost you $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 because you're paying for that stability.
Yes.
Now, Microsoft went and took their version of OS 2, and they were like, yeah, we don't care too much about the pickup truck. We want the sports car. And they'd made a lot of little changes and rewrote everything they could get a hold of, and then released it as Windows NT 3.5.
New technology?
The last version of OS 2 was OS 2 Warp 3.
Okay, yeah.
And they didn't want to release anything labeled 3.0 because they already made Windows 3.1.
Oh.
So it had to be a higher number.
Yeah.
And so they released it as NT 3.5 because they were like, that's like halfway between 3 and 4.
Yeah.
It's really good because it's not a whole new thing, but it's OS 2 with all the labels torn off. So we like it. And that was NT 3.5, and it was kind of a train wreck.
Oh.
Nobody really liked it all that much because the only thing that was really happy with it were big companies running big servers.
Yeah.
And they thought it was spectacular. And nobody else ever even heard of it. The big breakthrough for Microsoft was when they took a lot of their new shiny prettiness that they just made for Windows 95, and they put that on a new updated version of Windows NT, and they released Windows NT 4.0.
But the NT came about, though, from new technology, working with IBM, though?
Yeah. I mean, it was... So Microsoft and IBM, the whole time they were working together, made a shared version of OS2.
Yes.
And when they broke up, it's not like a divorce where one parent gets the kid. Both parents got a kid.
Okay.
They copied it.
Yeah.
And so they both did different things with it. IBM turned it into this really stable but really boring operating system that had its biggest success in ATM machines.
Yes.
And Microsoft made it shinier and more exciting, and they made a big win with companies that they would use Windows NT on all of their desktop computers at the workplace because it made them all one big networked group.
Okay.
And Windows 95 didn't really do that network stuff. Windows 95 was your computer. You turned it on, and it, like I said, it didn't understand the idea of users being different people. It was just a computer.
Yeah.
It just dealt with you, whoever was at the keyboard, and it ran programs and did stuff and video and audio, and ooh, so exciting.
So it just worked on one computer, not like all network
right.
computers.
Whereas Windows NT, it wasn't quite as shiny and pretty, and it wasn't quite as friendly. If you forgot your password, you were never getting in your computer again.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was secure.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it had all these cool networking doodads that let you put all your computers on a network and share files back and forth and print to a printer that was on somebody else's computer. And all the businesses were just blown away.
Oh, yeah. Well,
They
NT
thought it was the best.
Well, that was the thing. NT turned into 2008 and 10 probably. We're on an NT type background.
NT4 was a big win for companies, but it wasn't real great for people running it on a computer at home.
2000 wasn't supposed to be, but it actually was.
Yeah, Windows 2000, when it was being made, was Windows Project Neptune.
Okay.
And that was supposed to be one Windows for everyone. It was supposed to be networked and secure, but friendly and home user ready, and it was supposed to be everything to everyone.
It was, though, I thought.
It's a really hard mark to hit.
Okay.
And so Windows 2000, at the last minute, they sort of soft pedaled it, and they came out with Windows Millennium, which was one last set of patches on the inner tube that was Windows 95.
Yes, I remember that.
And they said, just play with Millennium. It's cool.
It was
Millennium, 2000, they're practically the same thing.
Yeah.
But it was one last round of patches on the inner tube. So, I mean, nobody really liked Millennium for good reason. It was pretty terrible.
I kind of liked it, but it was garbage, yeah. It had
2000
problems.
had problems where it didn't run people's programs.
I thought it did for the most part, even games.
Mostly.
Yeah.
But a lot of programs were still being written for 9X.
Oh,
and they were
yeah.
being written for bad computers that were written badly and run badly. And if you didn't badly well enough, you couldn't run the program.
Well, that was the thing. But NT, the work they put in there, they kind of worked with another company, IBM, and then they just took back everything. Well, I guess it wasn't even a 50-50 share. It was a 100 share, I guess.
That was the great thing. When you're dealing with software, everybody gets a copy at the end of the day.
That's true. That's true. See, I thought it was like they put the money in for IBM to do the research, and then they just took it back and say, listen, we want our stuff back.
No, it was a partnership. They were supposed to...
Okay, that's the
they
part
were going to be buddy-buddy, and they were going to take over the world.
Yeah.
And then Microsoft got annoyed, and Microsoft and IBM had different ideas about what their shiny new operating system was supposed to do.
So Microsoft obviously made out better. They marketed it better than IBM obviously did.
I don't know. IBM still has a lot of money.
Oh, they do. Well, actually, Lenovo. Is it in the Lenovo?
Lenovo is the Chinese company that came along and bought
A big chunk of IBM.
a really small chunk, actually.
Oh, laptops and stuff.
Laptops
And
and
desks.
low-end servers and desktops. But the funny thing is, the whole reason IBM was selling those was because they realized it cost them more money to run those parts of the company than they were making from those parts of the company.
Okay. See, I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that. So it was they were just cutting their losses, so to speak.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, they realized that when IBM made a ThinkPad, it cost them, $400 to build it, and then it cost them $20 a year for 10 years to support it.
Oh.
And everybody wanted to buy IBM for the support.
Yeah, because
So
IBM was great.
If you have a laptop that costs $400 to build and $20 a year to support, and you're selling it for $500, that means the first 5 years, that's fine, But then that second 5 years, you're actually losing money.
Yeah, and that's what they don't want to do.
You have to keep paying, Srini at the data center who, picks up the phone and supports it, because you said 10 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you got to keep paying him.
Yeah.
And it was a bad deal for IBM, and that's why they were happy to get rid of it. They sold off the desktop, laptop, and low-end server businesses to Lenovo, which gave them a great big chunk of cash, which they used to then turn around and pay all the guys that were supporting their stuff.
Okay.
For the 5 years for the metaphor.
Yeah.
And then they got it all out of their hair, and they were good. They were done. They were like, good, moving on.
Yeah, I see. I didn't know that. Hey, there's another story that I love. One of your favorite bedtime stories for me. No, is the one, because I always get this one wrong too, and this is a different direction, but with IBM and the whole misconception with Pentium 4, which
one?
The one where you told me at first the chip was actually decent, but it was so costly for Intel,
right,
that they had to basically cut performance out just to cheapen the processor, that it turned into a piece of crap after they were done.
Well, it was a little more complicated than that.
Okay.
Intel had been putting patches on the inner tube.
Yeah.
For, let's see, they started with the 8086 in the 70s. It was a big hit through the 80s. They did the 286, the 386, the 486, and then the Pentium 1, 2, and 3. They were all the same design.
Yeah, one had cache on, one had cache off.
They would add new things, and they would redo parts, but it was really the same design from the late 70s through the early 90s. The Pentium Pro was its own thing, and they were intending to put that in servers and stuff.
Yeah.
And it didn't really work out that way. Everybody liked them. They were really great chips. They were too expensive. So then the Pentium 2 was a Pentium Pro that they'd figured out how to make cheaper. And then the Pentium 3, as everyone knows, makes your internet faster.
Yeah, I was convinced of that from my boss.
It was basically just a tweaked up Pentium 2.
Yeah.
But then they had come to the end of the road. There were more patches than inner tube left.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they needed to throw it all away and start over. And when you're designing a CPU, there's two extremes. One's called a speedster, or the flash, and the other one is a brainiac design.
Yeah.
A brainiac design doesn't run that fast, but it does a lot of work for every tick of the clock.
Yeah. Oh, clock speeds, yes.
Right. A speedster doesn't do much work on any given tick, but it can tick really, really fast.
Well, that's where AMD came in.
It's like if you had the Hulk and the Flash helping you move house.
Yeah.
Well, the Hulk can pick up half your house, but it's going to take him 2 hours to walk to where your new place is.
Yeah.
The Flash only picks up one box each time, but he makes the round trip in 30 seconds.
Okay.
So those are the two extremes. What you usually want is a CPU that's somewhere in the middle. You want it to be capable of doing some good work and running pretty fast. But sometimes you have to go with one or the other. And AMD started work on a new Brainiac, and Intel said, no, we're going to show you. We're going to do something really revolutionary. And what they wanted to do was Intel has some of the best chip-making factories in the world.
Chip-making factories, yeah.
Anybody will tell you about it.
Yeah.
Because they have these huge fabs all over the world making chips every day nonstop, and they do really great work.
Yeah.
And Intel said, how can we turn that into winning the processor wars?
Okay.
Because in the 90s, there were lots of different companies you could get a CPU from. There was Cyrix and IDT and Centaur and VIA and Intel and AMD.
Yeah.
And it was funny because if you went back to the 1980s version, the IBM desktop that they were busy selling with Microsoft's stolen and rewritten OS on it, the processor inside your computer, it might say Intel, it might say AMD, and it might say Cyrix. And
I remember Cyrix.
No one even knew.
Yeah.
You would just buy an IBM PC, and who cares what's in it as long as it runs.
Yeah.
Well, in the 90s, it was getting more and more and more interesting to have a particular brand. Okay. And Intel said, we've got the best factories in the world for making chips. What kind of chip could we make that no one else could possibly keep up with us? And they sat down with all their chip designers, and they said, well, what if we made a speedster that was like ridiculous? we could make it a really simple design that you have to make absolutely perfect in order for it to run at any decent speed. And the marketing guys were like, that sounds brilliant, because we have billions of dollars of factories and no one else does.
Yeah.
And so the Pentium 4 design was supposed to go to something like 5 or 6 gigahertz.
It went pretty high.
It was supposed to, well, it went okay
3
high. It was supposed to go really high.
I didn't know that.
At this point, so we go back to the 90s, the late 90s, early 2000s, when Intel was busy thinking all this stuff. If the Pentium 4 plan had gone the way that they thought it was going to go then, we would have 20 and 30 gigahertz CPUs right now.
And you'd be glowing in the dark as well.
Yeah, they'd probably catch fire in Earth's atmosphere or something.
Well, I was thinking about radiation or whatever. I don't know.
That was the plan, though.
Yeah.
Was that they were supposed to go that fast.
I didn't know.
And Intel thought this was going to be a brilliant marketing move, because they would sell these 4 and 5 and 6 gigahertz CPUs next to IDT and Centaur and AMD's 1 gigahertz CPUs, and they totally just trash everybody.
Well, you need per clock speed. How much work is it actually bringing along workload?
Right. And the Pentium 4 carried a very, very, very small load.
Yeah.
The idea was supposed to be that, like the Flash helping you move house,
Yeah.
it was supposed to make thousands and thousands of trips for every one that everybody else did.
Yeah.
Well, when they went to actually make the chips, the guys at the factories that make the chips were like, here you go. We got done. It goes, 2.5 gigahertz.
Yeah.
And the marketing guys went, I think this is going to be a problem. You guys said we were going to do 5.
Yeah.
And now you're telling us 3.
Yeah, it's never gotten past 2 or 3 gigahertz even today on processors.
They realized there's physics got in the way.
Oh.
If you start switching a chip at 5 gigahertz,
Yeah.
it has a tendency to self-destruct.
Oh.
And it wasn't even like... So Intel got all pissed and went back to the factories, and they were like, you guys are the best in the world. We pay you so much money. Make a 5 gigahertz chip.
Yeah.
And the guys at the factories were like, we can make you one, but it catches fire when you turn it on.
Yeah.
And it always will.
Yeah.
And basically what Intel realized a little too late was that it wasn't about how good their chip was. It wasn't even really about the design of their chip. It's when you're using silicon with tiny wires in it, it can only go so fast.
Oh.
And then the wires catch fire.
Yeah. That's why they only go so fast
the Pentium
now.
4, I think the fastest Pentium 4 Intel ever shipped was like I don't think they actually made it to 4 gigahertz. I know I had a 3.6 at one point.
Wow, that's pretty fast.
And it was terrible, because it was so fast and it got so hot that it almost never ran at full speed.
Oh.
As soon as you started actually running things on it, it would start throttling to keep from catching fire.
See, that's weird, because AMD, even back in the day, they made processors that actually probably ran slower, but they did more per clock speed.
Right.
A lot more performance.
At the same time that Intel was doing all this stuff with the Pentium 4, and they were running out 1.7 and 1.8 gigahertz Pentium 4s, AMD was making Athlons at like 1.2 and 1.3 gigahertz that were faster.
Yeah, slapping the shit out of the
It was
other
the
ones.
Hulk moving house. He could pick up half your house in one go.
Yeah.
And so if you have a great big dumpster with all your stuff in it, the Hulk is the fastest guy to move your house.
Yeah.
If it's all laid out in the driveway, you need the Flash. Well, the problem was everything everybody was doing was in dumpsters, and the Hulk was way faster for almost everything. And so, yeah, it was a combination of two things. Intel gambled everything on being able to make the fastest chips in the world by a huge margin.
Yeah.
And they made the fastest chips in the world by a much smaller margin. And so their CPUs were actually slower.
I noticed that now today they do make better chips with the i series, which I don't know how long they're going to continue with that, because I think they're up to... I thought there was an i8.
They have an i9 now.
An i9.
Which is just a souped-up i7.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, too, because now I try to go, because this system I have now is running AMD, but the new flagship is their Ryzen, I guess.
Yep.
Which it seems like they have hyper-threading turned on the Ryzen. So,
well, the funny thing is they actually have reverse hyper-threading.
Really? Because I saw one that's got 8 cores, 8 threads, which would mean it has virtually 16 if you looked at it.
Well, it has to go back to the Pentium 4. The Pentium 4 brought so many cool things to the market while failing in an exceptional way.
The hyperthreading was one.
Hyperthreading was one of them because they designed the flash.
Yeah.
It was really, really, really fast as long as you gave it a fast supply of really tiny jobs to do.
Yeah.
Well, the problem was they were giving it jobs too slowly.
Oh.
And so the CPU would work, and then it would wait, and then it would work, and it would wait, and it would work, and it would wait.
That's where hyperthreading
And
came
so
in.
hyperthreading said, well, why don't we
Give you something to
give
do.
you a second ID card,
Yeah.
and then you can go work as one, and then as soon as you're waiting, give them the other card and ask for different work.
Oh, so it kept it busy all the time.
And so your operating system, Windows or whatever, would see 2 CPUs, and it would keep 2 piles of work going.
Yeah.
And if the Pentium 4 was fast enough, it could do both jobs at the same time and still spend some of its time waiting because of how fast it cycled.
Okay. So, but now you're saying that it's using reverse hyperthreading. So,
Kind of.
Kind of.
So Intel did some clever tricks and set things up a certain way so that each of their 1 CPUs looked like 2,
Yeah.
so that it could get two food lines to feed at.
It's always working. It's not
To
sitting
try and
idle.
keep it busy as much as they could.
Yeah.
Well, AMD has done something kind of backwards. So when your AMD Ryzen says it has 8 cores
In 8 threads.
and 8 threads,
Not all of them do, but
you actually have 4/8 CPUs.
really.
There are parts of each CPU that are shared with its neighbor.
Oh,
It's sort of like if you and your neighbor have a small lawn
yeah.
and you get together and you pool your money and you buy one really nice lawnmower and you
Oh.
buy one really nice shed and you put the shed right in the middle across the property line, and whoever needs the lawnmower can just go get it and mow their lawn.
Okay.
Well, it's a good idea, because if you're only using your lawnmower on, Saturday afternoon and your neighbor only ever uses it on Sunday afternoons, you've gotten twice as nice a lawnmower as you could have bought on your own.
Well, that's true.
Well, that's how Ryzen does things. There are parts of the CPU that aren't used all that often. The one that really stands out is the FPU, the floating point unit.
Yeah.
It does all kinds of the more complicated math, especially the kind that you do in like 3D games.
Okay.
3D games do a lot of floating point math because there's all that 3 of D's.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of floating point math in games, but for most of the things you do with your computer, there's not nearly as much floating point math. It does a lot of integer math.
Oh.
So you're sitting at your desktop, you're running your web browser, you're, running Office and typing up a document. Most of that stuff you're doing can be done with integer math units. And integer math units are very small and very simple to make. A floating point unit is a big, complicated chunk of the CPU.
Okay.
So if you can split it with your neighbor, that's great, because you probably won't need it at the same time, and you can just share it back and forth.
Because you actually brought up and made me think of something else. I'm going to go sidetracked a little bit because you're talking about integers and stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, how's that separate from like your GPU? You're talking a CPU having that, but the GPU does certain.
Well, a GPU is kind of a special case because your regular mainstream GPU, if you pull it apart and look really closely, there's like 1,000 tiny CPUs.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're not full CPUs because they can't do all kinds of work. They just do certain kinds of math. And
Okay.
They do it pretty fast, and they're very, 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 very small because you got to put 1,000 of them on a chip.
Yeah, and that's for your graphics GPU
Right.
for people
And
who don't
so
know.
It'll say we're gonna draw a line on the screen, and we're gonna figure out what color all these things should be. We're gonna figure out the shape of everything, and it'll actually split up all the complicated work of drawing your character on the screen into 1,000 tiny little jobs, and it'll send these little jobs out to each of those micro CPUs, shaders they call them.
Yeah, yeah.
And each shader will take its little tiny piece of data, and it'll do a very small, very simple piece of math very fast and return its results.
Okay.
And so a GPU and a CPU are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum.
Because I was going to say, like the Ryzen now, they bought out AMD and they made it ATI.
The other way.
Or ATI. They bought out ATI, made it AMD. I'm sorry. Yeah. And they're making some not great chips, but they're making some pretty decent chips, and are all on the same die, not the
Right.
cores are all in the same die.
Well, what I was just saying, though, is that the GPUs do tiny little bits of math
Yeah.
very, very, very fast and very many at once.
Yeah.
CPUs used to be, there was just one, and it did big, complicated math, very, very, very hard, but only one at a time.
Okay.
And then we started getting more and more and more cores because we realized the more of them you have, the more likely one of them is ready when you want to run things.
Okay, so that's what it is.
And so AMD is betting that in another 10 or 15 years, the difference between those jobs is gonna shrink.
Okay.
That your CPUs will get smaller and simpler, and your GPUs will get more capable and slower. And then somewhere down the road, the line will start to blur.
Okay.
And so that instead of having 1,000 micro CPUs that can't do all kinds of work, maybe you'd have 500 less micro CPUs that can do most kinds of work.
Okay.
And like I was saying about your CPU has to have an FPU.
FPU.
To work.
Okay.
But you don't use it all that often.
Okay.
So if you share one with your neighbor, you're both CPUs,
Okay.
but you can't both do floating point work at the same time.
No.
So one of AMD's clever ideas is they want to make, 500 micro CPUs that do the most common things only.
Okay.
And then there will be shared things that do the more complicated jobs.
Okay.
And so you won't be able to say, I have a 6-core CPU. It'll be, well, I have a 700-core CPU when I'm doing light integer work, and I have a 17-core CPU when I'm doing complicated single input, multiple data floating point work. And most of the time, it's somewhere between those two numbers.
See, that's interesting because AMD is like actually much more affordable than Intel too, and they're actually staying in the game on making some decent stuff.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because if AMD is right, if they win their bet, the hardware that we're running in the future for our computers and our phones and our tablets, it'll be alien to us now.
Oh wow!
It'll be so different that we'll have trouble understanding it without learning new things in the meantime.
Yeah.
Like I said, there won't be, I have this many cores.
Yeah.
It'll be I have this CPU module and it's capable of this kind of thing and this many of this kind of thing, and it'll be a whole bunch of different numbers.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so they're going a different route. Intel's sticking with that game, I guess, of saying
Intel thinks it's funny because they think the same thing as AMD.
Oh, they do.
They're coming from a different direction.
Oh.
So AMD says the kind of things that a GPU does now and the kind of things that a CPU does now are going to change and meet up in the middle somewhere down the road.
See, I didn't know that. That's
And
something new
Intel
to me.
says you don't need a GPU.
Well,
All you need is a CPU with a crap load of cores.
Yeah, well, that's the number game, like I said.
If you really think about it, they're saying the same thing. They're just saying it in two completely
differently.
different ways.
Okay, because Intel's trying to get into making their own graphics chips, but I guess.
I have heard that we will see a graphics card from Intel sometime in the next year.
I saw a prototype, so to speak. It looked like your NVIDIA graphics card you would get, on with a heat sink and fan on top and everything. It was like, wow, this is kind of weird.
Well, it's funny. It looks like the current AMD and NVIDIA cards
Yes.
for a really simple reason. It's the same reason a dolphin and a shark look the same. They have nothing in common, but that shape is the best shape for moving through the water very quickly.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And so that boxy shape with a fan at one end and a vent at the other,
yeah.
that's the best shape when you have something that gets hot and you got to move a lot of air through it inside a computer.
Okay, I mean,
So
it's cool. I still have my doubts about Intel making a
I
good.
have not heard anything from Intel about their upcoming graphics stuff. And if they want to talk to me, call me.
That would be cool.
You've got my
I saw the prototype picture of it, but that was about it.
Yeah.
I would prefer to still stick with NVIDIA and AMD.
Well, this will be Intel's third go at being a graphics company.
Well, good luck with that one.
Because they made graphics cards back in the day.
Yeah.
I remember the i740 Starfighter, the graphics card nobody wanted to have. And then Intel got out of it, which was smart because graphics was not a winning business then. And then not that many years ago, they were working on a project to try and do two things at the same time. They wanted to make the Xeon Phi, which was going to be a card full of micro CPUs.
Oh.
Not complete CPUs, but almost complete CPUs. And they were going to make them really, really tiny and put a whole crap load of them on a card, on a chip.
Yeah.
And that way you could send a whole lot of jobs there, and it would have a CPU ready for you all the time.
That sounds pretty cool.
And they said, it's funny because that has a lot of the same things in common as a graphics card. Maybe if we made a graphics card, except instead of shaders, they were complete CPUs.
Yeah.
Ooh, yes. Intel's all turned on by this talk. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And they made one, and they were the prototype, the development was called Larrabee. And it was ready to go, but at the last minute they realized that the graphics cards that were already on the market were faster. And rather than launch a slow product and make it faster, they were like, never mind, we're just going to cut the whole thing. We don't think there's a lot of money over there anyway.
Oh, there is, because NVIDIA made their life off of it. AMD kind of got bought out.
Well, it's hard to sell slow graphics cards.
That's true.
I don't really blame Intel for it. And they didn't lose anything.
No.
Because the Xeon Phi was wildly successful.
Okay.
Even now, they still sell tons of those things.
Well, Intel makes okay graphics. They are making graphics cards on their chipsets with their...
Well, that was the other thing, too. All of the talent that they had for making graphics cards, they kept.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But instead of working on the Larrabee graphics card,
yeah,
they worked on the graphics controller built into their CPUs.
See,
and
that's
it's the same kind of work. So it keeps them working, and it keeps them busy, and it keeps them making products you can sell.
I mean, preferably, I like the AMD ones where you get a really good CPU and a decent GPU.
Yeah.
And they were both decent companies and still are. And it's more... to me, maybe I'm just going by the name because I remembered it was ATI back in the day, and to me, it's still ATI for the graphics.
I do the same thing. I still talk about ATI like it's a company on its own still.
Yeah, and it was the underdog, but they make some really damn good chips still.
Well, it's funny because AMD bought ATI, and then the money they made from ATI kept AMD afloat for a couple of those years.
Mm-hmm.
Because they used up all their cash on hand buying ATI. And then ATI was the only part of AMD that was making a profit.
Yeah.
For like 2 or 3 years after that. It was probably a pretty smart buy.
I thought it was too, because I mean that's why even when I got this, I wanted something that had AMD. I wanted to buy the poor man's chip, or I mean the, I don't know what you want to call it, but yeah, the underdog.
I don't think I have any AMD systems in my house right now. I feel really bad about that.
Get out of here! No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I used to be a big fan.
I remember you're the one who actually introduced me to that too, AMD, and how I mean AMD and ATI.
Yeah,
because ATI, when they first put out the first Radeon, that was like, yeah, this is going to be the next thing that's going to really dig into NVIDIA, make them, not get sloppy with their stuff. So
they're still fighting, so
and they're doing a good job. They're doing an excellent job, I think. I mean, with the new Ryzens and stuff.
AMD, if you're listening, send me stuff.
Yeah. Didn't they used to? They used to get some stuff to do reviews on from different hardware.
Once or twice. I think most of the stuff I got was from Intel.
Oh, it was from Intel?
That was because there was actually a confusion.
Yeah.
I went to one of the Intel events.
You had put me down as one of your...
And they were like, hey, did you get your review hardware for the launch? And I was like, no. But what was funny is the website actually had...
Yeah,
they just didn't tell me.
But you did.
I wasn't in part of that project.
But you did do some reviews on some hardware.
Yeah,
and you got to keep it afterwards.
That's usually the way of it.
Yeah,
it depends on what it is. A lot of times, the expensive stuff they tell you send it back. The less expensive stuff, they're like, enjoy.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, because I remember you were doing reviews online for some hardware, and you got it sent to the house, and it was like, wow, this is cool, very cool.
Yeah, I used to write now and then for a website called 2CPU back when it was a thing.
That's it. Okay, because I was going to say like Tech Report you used to talk about, and the Resistor, and I forget the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember you used to write for this. Hey, I have another question. This is great so far, by the way. It's almost an hour and 40 minutes. Yes.
I was going to say, I'm starting to get a little tired.
No, okay. I do have one other question. I'm not going to bore, because I could talk for hours. You could talk for hours, I'm sure. But I know it's just our legs and feet fall asleep. One thing that came to mind, going back to the Windows thing, and Linux or Unix, and I remember you tell me this, and I still remember this analogy. The problem with Windows back in the day is when you opened up something, you put it back, you said, Walter, it's like having a folder, I guess, with papers in there, and you open it up, but you don't put them all back in that folder. You just kind of throw them across the room, and they don't go back, which is called fragmentation, if I remember that correctly.
Yeah.
You gave me this analogy of like being in the room and taking some stuff out, papers, and not put them all back in the nice little thing, and you said, I think Linux and Unix kind of puts everything back where it belongs, so you get less fragmentation. Is that still true? With the fragmentation thing, because they have these defragmentation programs.
Well, it kind of is, but disks have gotten a lot smarter too.
Well, they're
So
solid state.
The analogy I used to use was that it would be like if you had a binder full of paper.
Yeah.
And it was full of paper.
Yeah.
But then you needed to add some pages.
Yeah.
Well, there was no way to do that. You couldn't fit it in the binder, so you had to sort of like tape it to the back, or it just fell on the floor, or you started another binder.
Yeah.
But if you had 5 extra pages and you went out and bought a second binder that held 5 pages, and you put them in there, and then, oh wait, by the way, I've got this other page.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? At some point, you're out of space.
Yeah.
The way most file systems do it these days is they'll give you a binder, and when it's full, they'll give you another big binder.
Okay.
Not a small one that fits what you're doing. They'll give you a big binder.
Yeah.
And so they'll allocate the disk in larger blocks. And so when you're making little tiny changes, you're wasting a big chunk of disk, but on the other hand, you're not spreading fragments all over the place either.
But that's bigger with Windows still, isn't it, than with other Unix or Linux?
Well, the funny thing is, SSDs came around.
Yeah.
And SSDs makes it so it doesn't matter.
Oh, so you do get fragmentation.
Even if you fragment like crazy, reading this bit there or that bit over there is exactly the same speed on an SSD. Any bit you can ask for, they all arrive pretty much instantaneously.
The only thing is the
problem
yeah.
was when you used to scatter information all over your disk.
Yeah.
There's actually a little physical arm in there with a magnet on the end that
I
goes
know.
back and forth to read it. And so you would hear it. If your disk was really fragmented, you turn your computer on and you hear it go
Because it's got to find everything.
and it's jumping all over the place just to pick up all the bits you want, just to start up Windows, and you'd hear your hard drive just chattering away. Chatter.
It will kill it after a while.
It would usually last for a good long while, but it means it spent most of its time working on working.
Yeah.
It would be like if I made you walk to work.
Yeah.
Well, most of your day would be walking to work and walking home. You wouldn't actually get all that much work done.
Okay.
You'd be like, boss, I got to knock off early because I got to start walking home so that I can still get an hour or two of sleep before I turn around and start walking back.
Yeah.
And your boss wouldn't stand for that. That'd be ridiculous. SSDs, it's like if everybody had a teleporter. So you could just, get dressed, brush your teeth, eat breakfast, dial in work's address on your little booth, and boop, you're at work.
Yeah.
There's no travel time.
Yeah.
Well, then you'd work in Sri Lanka or Africa or Antarctica or wherever. It wouldn't matter because they're all the same distance away. It's just numbers on the little pad on the wall and you're there. Well, SSDs are like that too. It'd be like if you had a delivery job.
Yeah.
And you had a bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to go from here where you live into Center City, Philadelphia, and then you had to go down to Wilmington, and then you had to come back here.
Oh.
If you're doing that on a bicycle, you can't.
You can't.
Just that one round trip would take more than a day.
Well, yeah.
But then if you have a car or a motorcycle,
It'd be a little
you could
easier.
do that.
Yeah.
You could fit that in a day. Now, if you go back to our teleporter booths, well, yeah, who wouldn't want that job? You just dial in a number, go there, hand them a package, dial another number, you're back. Dial another number, you go to the other place, hand them a package, dial your number, you're back.
So,
And it's like that, so you're done your day's work in 10 minutes.
well, that's true. So the SSD, per se, doesn't matter if it fragments, but the thing is, though, does Windows still fragment just as much as it used to, maybe less, and does Linux fragment?
Less.
A little less.
And SSDs make it so it doesn't matter.
Okay, now...
It's that delivery job.
Okay.
Now they all have teleporters. So
They're
they don't
very
care.
fast.
They don't care where the deliveries are going.
Yeah.
So sure, your disk just fragmented up real good, and there's a package for your delivery job in Philly, and there's one in, Amsterdam, and
Yeah.
there's one in China.
Yeah.
Well, on a bicycle or in a car,
It would be impossible. Yeah.
But with your teleporter booths, yeah, whatever. Sure. Packages all over the planet, no problem. Don't care.
Well, that's the only thing. But does Linux and Unix, do you really, and even Apple, because Apple runs, that OS underneath the hood, it's Unix, FreeBSD or whatever. Does it fragment at all? Slightly? No.
Everybody still fragments some. But because SSDs came along, nobody's really spending a lot of time working on it right now.
Okay.
Linux has always been really, really, really good about fragmenting because they have file systems that are smart about how they put data down. And so it would rather be slow and do it right than be fast and do it wrong.
Actually, Linux is faster than Windows in a lot of ways.
Well, I mean, in this specific example of file systems.
Yeah.
The Linux file system will do the right job slower rather than doing the wrong job and being ready for the next thing.
See, that's the thing. I'd rather have something that runs correctly instead of sloppy, so to speak. Because wouldn't Windows still be a little bit of a sloppy written OS as opposed to the other ones out there?
Yeah, no? NTFS still has fragmentation issues. You still need a defragmenter if you run Windows.
Yeah, and it's not necessary for my Mac or for my Linux box now, I guess. It's not as important. Not as much.
And like I said, it's getting to the point where SSDs are getting commonplace.
Yeah.
They're showing up in more and more and more things. Every phone you see on the market has flash storage. Every tablet has flash storage. All of your new Macs, they're all flash.
Yeah.
There's very few disks.
Yeah, they don't.
Your Black Friday Walmart computers are going to start having SSDs this year, if not next.
That's true. I mean, I have a hard drive in here, a conventional one for this cheap Linux box I put together, but everything else is SSD in my on my laptops.
Well, the nice thing is if it's running Linux is very careful about fragmentation. It'll do smart things behind the scenes. So when you're not using the computer, it can do some cleanup and some maintenance tasks.
Without you even knowing it, I guess.
When you copy and move files, it'll build some maintenance into that.
See, that's nice. I like that.
Your file copy might take just a tiny little bit longer on Linux than it did in Windows, but on Linux, it's also doing something clever. It's putting it in a new space on the disk, and it's putting it all back together.
Yeah.
Whereas Windows would just copy the fragments, and where they fell. It would be done faster, but it wouldn't be done better.
See, that's the thing. That's what convinces me again why I like Linux or Mac OS for running my stuff on.
Yeah, both Linux and most Unixes and Mac OS will try to do a little bit of housekeeping in the background as long as there's enough free disk space for them to do it.
Oh, yeah. So
you'll never hear about, I really need to defragment my Linux machine.
Yeah, exactly.
It builds it into everything you do.
See, that's what I like. I mean, the only downfall, again, is if you want to play some games and stuff, then you're forced to use the necessary evil of Microsoft.
That's why I got a Windows computer.
Yeah, I know. I'm almost... Okay, I got to cut this off soon. I guess we're going to go on 2 hours. What about my Xbox One X now, though? Because that doesn't have any fragmentation programs written into that, I don't think.
No, but it has flash and a hard drive. And it doesn't do the same kind of things with a hard drive that you do.
Oh.
So like your Xbox, when it copies a game from a disk to the hard disk,
when
it installs a game from the internet, it installs it all in one piece.
Okay.
And if it needs to make any changes, it'll do it the Linux and Mac OS way, where it reads everything and writes it to a new place with the new data built in, so it's all in one place again, and then it'll erase the original spot and mark it free.
Well, hey, if they can put Windows 10 on that Xbox One X, why can't they do that for the Windows 10 on your desktop then to make it that sufficient?
Well, the funny thing is, a couple of years ago, they tried to.
Oh, they did?
When Windows 8 was in beta, they were talking about the WinRe file system, which was going to be the next generation of shiny, crazy stuff. Like, there weren't going to be files, there weren't going to be folders, there weren't going to be directories. It was all going to be object-based and relational, and it was all going to be... It's half a file system and half a database.
Yeah.
They had crazy ideas for what they were going to do, and then they did, like, a quarter of it and then called it a day.
Oh, see, that's a shame, because, I mean, some of the systems out there for Windows look pretty impressive. I'm not a big fan of Windows, But it looks pretty impressive. But if they made a solid system, like you mentioned, if they would have done that, I probably would definitely consider going and having a Windows machine as well.
It's easy to say you're going to change the world. And then when it comes time to actually do the work, you're
Forget
like,
it.
I'm changing my mind about this, guys. Can we just change a small piece and then call it a day?
Yeah, we're tired already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Windows has been a victim of that a couple times, where they went out to change the world, and then they saw how much work it was, and they went, let's change some of it, and then we'll all go home for dinner.
That kind of sucks. That really sucks.
I can't really blame them.
No, I know, but that's what keeps me alive on Windows and on Mac. Sorry, that was a dirty word I just said. That's like a Freudian slip of some sort. But don't worry. Hey, by the way, because I mentioned to you on the phone earlier that a couple days, a week or so from now, we're going to have our Mac, what's coming out next year type deal. What's coming out next couple months.
WWDC, the Worldwide Developer Conference.
Yes, and it's going to have a new iWatch. You know, I'm going to be curious about. Yes, and then the new iPhone 10s,
so wait,
the cheap ones.
Does this mean Walter's going to be pre-ordering the new iWatch shortly? And
Possibly.
I can make an offer on his old watch?
Possibly, and then maybe a
How
new
much?
iPhone.
I'll give you $10.
But I don't want to rip you off, though.
All right. $7.
As long as
$7 for your iWatch.
As long as that's not too much.
I'll tell you what, I'll give you $10. I'll go back to $10. I'll give
you
you
sure?
$10. Yeah.
I'm tempted to take that.
Okay.
I'm tempted because that, and then have the new iPhone 10s are going to be the cheap versions of the 10s.
Yeah, I heard that this year there's going to be 2 iPhone 10s.
Yeah.
That the big iPhone 10, the shiny iPhone 10, is still going to be ridiculously expensive, but that the screen is literally going to go edge to edge to edge.
Oh, yeah, but then there's going to be the one that's going to be the size of my 8.
They said,
Plus.
This is not the name, but the iPhone X SE.
Oh, yes, I heard
they
about
swear to
that.
God, they're not using that name.
They're not using it.
But it kind of fits because it explains it. They're going to use like an iPhone 8 case and cheaped up iPhone X guts.
Yeah.
And try to make a more affordable iPhone X.
I heard about, but it's going to be a
why,
6.5.
But why though?
No,
the 6.5 is the expensive one.
Oh, that's going to be an expensive one.
Yeah.
But it's going to be cheap too, though, right? They're using cheaper material on it, or no?
They always do.
Oh, well,
That's Apple's magical thing. They come out with something that's shiny and great, and then they find ways to make it cheaper.
Yeah. Well, that's well, they want more money in their pocket, and we're supposed to have
I'm a big fan of money in my pocket. I can't really.
No, I know. But then maybe possibly, which maybe the trash bin might eventually end up for sale too. A new Mac Pro finally next year.
2019. That's what they told us.
Yeah. Now
they told us that a year and a half ago.
That's true too.
So they've had plenty of time. They should have something exciting to show this year.
I hope so. Now, one thing I was curious about, I know, and I heard they don't work that well. You can get an external, but it has to be 3.0 external. You could put a full-size graphics card onto your laptop. You can't do that for the Mac. Thunderbolt 3.
And your trash can Mac has Thunderbolt
2.0. So you can't use that.
Right. I mean, you kind of can.
Because it's backwards compatible?
It is backwards compatible, but there's not enough bandwidth for a full-speed link.
Yeah.
So you'll get some benefits out of it, but not all of them.
It'd be kind of a waste of money, though.
From a software and hardware perspective, there is absolutely nothing stopping you from going on Amazon right now and buying one of the Thunderbolt GPU external enclosures.
Yeah, I've seen one.
Buying a GTX 1080 Ti and getting a Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3 adapter and plugging it into your Mac Pro. It should work. I'm pretty sure it would work.
Because I'm running the newest OS, too. Yeah, it has to be up to date.
And it would be faster.
It would be.
But it wouldn't be as fast as it could be.
Okay. Because what I'm running now is what? It's the two AMD Fire Pros, which are okay.
Yeah.
But they're not spectacular.
Well, they're professional GPUs, so they're optimized for work-related tasks more than gaming, and they're also 4 years old, 5 years old at this point.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And unfortunately, GPUs get markedly faster every year or two, so they've been left behind like 3 or 4 cycles now.
I was going to say more like 6 months. Every 6 months to a year they update this stuff.
It used to be every 6 months. Now it's more like every year.
Wow. That's actually getting a little bit better.
GTX 1080 Ti came out about this time last year,
Yeah.
And we're not even hearing about the new one yet. There's been some rumors, but nothing solid. And the GTX 1080 was a full year before that.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So, yeah, it's about every year for GPUs currently.
That's not too bad, because I remember when it was that 6-month mark. That was really ridiculous.
I remember you would just get used to your GPU and you'd be getting ready to sell it and buy the next one because it's only got a month left till the new one comes out.
I know. It really sucked, too.
It burned a lot of money, too.
It definitely did. Hey, one last question, because we're actually ending up in 2 hours. I know that you're probably ready to scream. VR world. What's going on in the VR world? It's never going to happen to Mac, I guess, with VR.
Apple's muttered a couple times that they want to support VR.
I hope they do.
Then it comes time to do the work, and they're like, nah, we've got something else magical. We're going to do a new phone.
Jerks. What about VR to be more independent, like I have, like the Oculus Go? What's going on with that, with the future on that?
Honestly, I don't know.
Oh.
You bet on one side of that, and I bet on the other, and I could not tell you which one of us is more likely to be right.
Oh.
Because, I mean, you're seeing now that there's compromises if you want to be mobile.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to have a battery.
You do.
And you got to be able to move around. So, cordless is good. Everybody's agreeing cordless is good. But then you're also seeing that the batteries don't last long enough.
Actually, it's funny because I'm only doing light work on my Oculus Go, but I do have it plugged in and I haven't had any problems. If you try to do some serious...
You'll be more likely to overheat, though.
That's the thing. If you do play even like a zombie game, 360 zombie game, that won't last too long before it actually says the CPU is overheating. You need to take it off now and let it go off.
Well, that one's because they're designing for being unplugged, and they're designing running off the battery. When you're plugged in, it can run at full speed, and it's not holding itself back at all. And so the first thing that'll slow it down is when it runs into its thermal limit.
Yeah, which it does. Because I actually had I don't know if I told you, I had the warning come up the other day. It was like, yeah, it's overheated. We advise you take it off for a few minutes. It's really hot. We need to cool off, guy.
See, now all you got to do
is
we'll sit down with a drill and a hacksaw, and we'll get some ventilation holes going.
It's not bad.
And then we'll glue some heat sinks on the bits that are getting hot, and we'll put some little fans on there, and then you really will look like a Borg.
Yes. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. It'll look great.
Yeah.
Just keep your fingers away from your face.
Yes. I will look like Picard. No. Change. Oh, well, I wish I looked like 7 and 9. No, I'm just kidding. But no. Well, I wish we had 7 and 9. But I will look like a Borg. But
yeah, but not the good ones.
No, unfortunately. Alrighty, I could go on for hours, but I am going on to almost 2 hours, which is I'm probably longer than you wanted to. I thought you probably would be able to suffer through a lot less than that, but I forced out 2 hours out of you almost now. So that's a good thing. And it's been good because I could go on for hours. Trust me, I'm sure you can too.
Well, I was just saying, if I blow you off enough weekends in a row, well, then I have to sit here until you're done talking.
Oh, then okay. We got another 2 hours to go, folks. So no, I'm just kidding. We'll do that to you.
I didn't cancel on you that many weekends.
No. Well, this is actually impressive because this is the first I've been wanting to do a show with you, and I just couldn't figure out what to do. I figured I want to do one on Linux to understand it. So I think we touched upon some light stuff on there, which is perfect. Maybe we'll get more people interested because I'm actually talking before I did a show on Linux, and I've been getting hits on that still. But that's just me talking about fluff talk, not really understanding how it works.
Well, if your people that are listening have questions, send them to you, and you can send them to me, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. And then we could do a follow-up show and talk about the questions we got.
Yeah, that's true too. That's
I'm all
true.
for it.
Yeah, because Linux actually does got a lot of potential, more so now. It's like what Mac used to be like when I first started using Macs, remember? And I got a Mac, and I ended up putting Windows on there, and it was like, why are you running Windows on a Mac? Why don't you just buy a computer, PC? Yeah, but then it got to the point, Mac became so user-friendly, everything I was using software-wise was there on the Mac, and it ran a lot better. Now that's happened with the Linux world, where Linux is becoming definitely more, I would say... for us Nuvos people, I still consider myself a Padawan or a Nuvos person, more friendly for people like myself.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple distributions have been making major strides in making things friendly and usable and simple. and it's a good time for it too.
Yeah, which is nice.
And I mean, going back to one of the first things I said with we're replacing Xorg with Wayland.
Yeah.
And that's going to bring in all sorts of things that'll make it easier to get things done and do the kind of things you expect to be able to do. One of the things that's been really tricky for Linux so far has been when you dynamically plug in and unplug things. Like you've got your laptop.
Yeah.
And you're going to do a presentation.
Yeah.
So you plug in a projector. Well, now you have 2 monitors. That's how Xorg sees it. And
yeah.
Wait a minute. We only had 1 a minute ago. Now we have 2. Well, we have to shut down, and then we have to start back up with 2 monitors. And now, okay, we're showing on the projector. Yeah. But in the meantime, you plugged it in, and the whole thing went black, and then it stayed black for like 10 seconds, and then there was some stuff on the screen, and then it came back up.
Yeah.
But now, your start button and your taskbar and your task list are all up on the projector and not on your local screen.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I need the same thing on both screens. And it has to shut down, and it has to start up again, and it has to lay everything out again. And there are some things that you're going to want to do, and Xorg was never meant to do those kind of things. And so it gets tricky. But then Wayland is much younger and much more recent, and so it's built around those kind of jobs. And so it'll make things easier again.
Okay. See, that's what's good. I mean, yeah, I'm seeing a brighter future for Linux. Who knows? Eventually, maybe Linux have a competitive market in computers you buy in Walmart or Best Buy or something.
It's making progress. I wouldn't be surprised to see a Walmart PC with Linux on it fairly soon.
That would be really nice. Cause
I think they did that once before.
I didn't know that because, well, this was like actually the first OS I actually downloaded and successfully. It was really simple. It made a bootable disk off of a flash drive because I don't have that knowledge to know how to do it on my own. And that's what I'm running right now. And then you tweaked it for me, though, because there were certain things.
Well, I was just say, if you ever need to again, Windows and Mac OS have also made big strides in that, too.
Wow.
So if you need to whip up a USB with an OS on it, give me a ring because all of them do that now.
It's nice. I mean, it's just like Linux, though, is just... It's free too, so that.
Well, yeah.
And you got people like, hey, I have a little bit of a problem over here. There's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to see that problem before even I say something, and they're going to fix it and make sure it goes back into the next build, I guess you call it.
Yeah, next build or next release or whatever.
Next release, and you don't really get that as often. You do get it a lot, but not as often.
Windows is trying to do that.
Trying to, yeah.
If you do the Windows Insider program,
yeah,
they send beta versions of Windows out over the wire to you, and there's a feedback hub so that you can tell them what you're seeing and what's not working, and you're supposed to be able to just Google it up and get answers. And it's a step in the right direction. I'll see how it goes for them. It
is a step, but maybe it's because they're seeing what Linux is doing. They're trying to, hey, we're going to lose ground if we don't see what...
If the other guy's outrunning you,
yeah,
look to see what he's doing. If it makes sense, do that too.
Yeah, well, that's what keeps them legit. That's what's the same thing, even though it's different with the graphics cards company with AMD and NVIDIA or Intel and AMD. You try to keep the competitor honest and making sure they give you your most, I guess, for no money or for your money, because Linux is for
money.
Yeah, metaphorical, like what you just said.
Yep.
So yeah, but I'm just impressed because like I never thought I would be able to use Linux for anything else besides just to look at. Oh, this looks cool, but I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, there'll be new exciting versions regularly, and we'll have new things in the years to come. So.
That's true, and it's plug and play too at this point, and you still have that mobility to do more than just plug and play, which makes it more robust.
Like I said, there's things that are being changed. Like Xorg is really old. I remember when Xorg took over from X386, and then if you talk about X386, that goes back to the 80s. To the 90s when Linux was new and young.
Wow, you're saying before OB1 now.
But when something needs big changes to do the kind of things we expect from it, Linux is pretty good about, saying, hey, all right, well, we're going to sit down and we're going to get everything done. What do we need to do, and how ugly of a mess do we need to make to get everything to where it needs to be?
That's the part I like. That's what impressed me, and I guess you convinced me, and in some way you did convince me to go check out Linux again. I think it was when I wanted to run Mac on a PC because I was getting fed up with Windows already again, and you can't do that.
Apple works really hard to make that not a good idea.
Well, actually, they did me a favor that way, too, because then that forced me to, like, look at the Linux as you were telling me about. You were telling me for a longest time, hey, Walt, you should check out, was it Gen 2, or was it...
Gen 2 would have been rough.
Okay, maybe it was Ubuntu then.
Ubuntu. Ubuntu's friendly.
That, and you were mentioning this stuff to me, and it was like, yeah, I'm not sure. But then it was like, well, maybe I'll give it a shot, and I was glad I did.
And now you're recording your podcast on it.
Now I'm recording my podcast on it. So, yeah, that is excellent. So that is perfect. All right, Rich, it's after 2 hours of talking. That's really good, and I could have plenty more to talk about. But
I'm tired and I'm hungry.
You're tired and you're hungry, and you got to see the new Star Wars Solo, which I recommend for everybody to see because I thought it was really good. But it's good. I want to hear more people. I hope it's one of these things where I think this happened with movies before in the past, where a movie may come out at the wrong time, so it doesn't pick up with the people, the viewers, until like a little bit later than not the opening weekend.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, you got what do you call it? Infinity Wars. You have Deadpool 2, and Black Panther's still out there, which was really good.
I think it's finally done now because it just came out on Blu-ray, and that'll murder it.
It did, but some people it will, but some people still probably want to see it on the big screen if they can, even though you can get a VR and do the same thing.
I would say you're out of time.
I'm out of time. I'm out of time.
Oh, well, you're out of time too, but
well.
Everybody's out of time to go see Black Panther in theaters because once it's out on Blu-ray, that just...
Oh, no, I have the Blu-ray over there, and I watched it. I was like, wow, this is incredible. I didn't think it was going to be this good. But, yeah, you had so many movies that just came out recently. They're all Marvel Universe movies, and that kind of crushed any possibility for Star Wars, the new one, to actually take some ground, unfortunately. And I think it was other reasons, too. I think people weren't too impressed by what they saw. I was one of them, but then I went to the theaters and had taken my chances, and I definitely did not regret it. So... Maybe.
I was going to say, I take the opposite viewpoint. I don't think Solo's doing well, because I think Solo isn't up to it.
I went in with that expectation, but I came out with a different point of view when I watched it. So I'm hoping that maybe it'll have like a resurgence or something. Maybe the first it came out at a bad time, and maybe it might like make more money by next weekend or something after or whatever after these other films kind of run their course for a while. I don't know.
It's a possibility.
I'm crossing my fingers. Alrighty, we're almost at 10 minutes after 2 hours, so...
Walter!
I'm sorry.
Walter, shut up!
I'm sorry, but
Stop
I love
talking.
to talk. No, I want to talk. No. Mom. No. Alrighty, folks.
Get your mother into this.
No, I know. Sorry. Folks, I had Rich Mingin on tonight. We were talking about Linux and some other computer stuff. I finally got somebody who knows what they're talking about, me not just BSing about or pretending to know what I'm talking about. So that was... No, that was perfect. That was good. So when I'll listen back at this, I'll like learn even more from what we discussed.
Oh my God, you were right. Black Panther is still in theaters.
Ha ha. Well,
not many,
but it's there.
But oh my God,
so
don't these people have Blu-ray players?
I can't say. I was going to say no. Yes.
Same price as a movie ticket, and then you get to keep it.
You know what's that's really scary? A lot of these movies, you can't actually buy and own them for the same price you're paying for a freaking ticket nowadays. That's That's sad. That's really sad. But
with the times.
I know. Well, sometimes you know what it is too. I know. I'll cut this off then, folks. I'm going to cut this off.
I was about to say something. Walter, no, we can't go to 2.5 hours, Walter.
No, we're going to go to 2.5. No, we won't. A lot of times I hate going in the theaters because you got the people kicking your seats who talk through the movie like they're at home.
Pull their phone out and start texting somebody.
Yes. And you know what? Especially with VR, which is going to really crush movie theater tickets, you can sit in a virtual movie theater with nobody there. It's great. You don't have anybody to talk back to. I watched movies on the VR, and it was like, wow, this is like being at the movie theater down the street from our house, and I don't have anybody freaking driving me crazy.
I was to say, I've played with movie theater stuff a little bit on my Rift, And I think once the resolution goes up a little more than it is now, so that it gets rid of the screen door effect, and once the field of view gets a little bit wider, so you stop feeling like you're looking through a pair of goggles and you start feeling like you're actually there, I could definitely see that. It could take a lot away from the movie theater experience.
Unfortunately, I mean, fortunate for us, because then we don't have to deal with other nuisance in the movie theater, and plus save money on buying popcorn and stuff. But yeah, it's going to really kill the ticket sales in the movie theaters. Not yet, but it will get there.
Good riddance.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that one.
It's a time. It's a change that time has come.
Yeah.
Movie theaters will go the way of the drive-ins. There'll still be some around, but you'll have to look for them really hard.
Yes. It'll be also like vinyl one. It made a little bit of a resurgence, but yeah, it's going to disappear, and it's going to be like really hard to find. They belong in a museum.
Yeah, so do you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I remember when I was your age. No, I don't. That was too long ago, you young whippersnapper. Alrighty, we are at 10 after, so I'm sorry. I'm
feeling faint.
Okay, I'm cutting this off now, folks. It was Rich Mingin. I'm glad you came over and did this show. I was very
happy to.
Yes, I learned a lot. I will learn more as I listen to it again. So we learned some real facts about computers, so I thank you for that. Again, this is Walter from iWalter. My guest was Rich Mingin on this Memorial Day weekend. I'll make sure I say it right, because sometimes I'll say the wrong holiday, trust me. And even though it's not technically a holiday, it's more respecting people who had served our country.
Find an active duty serviceman and send him a candy bar.
Yes. What's wrong with that?
At the very least.
Yes, exactly. So we have our freedom. I can talk about what I want to talk about. Rich can talk what he wants to talk about. And I can actually have a show with cleaning, with no explicit contents this time. Wow, that's different for me, because I like to curse.
I thought I wasn't allowed to.
Oh yeah, you can curse. I curse all the time. Go ahead.
Now you say something?
Yes.
We got to go back and do the whole 2 hours again.
Oh, if you want to, that's fine with me. Yes. What was that comedian who say, well, you can't say shit, fuck.
George Carlin.
George Carlin.
7 words you can't say on TV.
You can say them on this podcast.
Now you tell me.
Yes.
Damn it.
I'm sorry. I like having an explicit whatever content.
Well, if you bleep me those 2 or 3 times just now, then you could still put your label on there. You'd be like,
no, I'll put it on
safe.
there.
Only episode.
Yeah.
Limited collector's edition.
Yes. What's up, motherfucker?
Now you got to beep 4 times.
No, I'm not going to beep, but I'll put the explicit. I have to put the curse in there. It's not me if I don't do that.
Oh, well.
Well, alrighty, Rich. Well, thank you again, because we're going to go into another half hour. It'll be 2.5 hours. I know you're
You already did the wrap up. You're done.
Okay. Well, everyone, thank you very much for listening to me. This is iWalter. Walter from iWalter with Rich Mingin.
You said that already.
I said that already. I'm saying it 100 more times. But thanks a lot, and have a good Memorial Day weekend.